In a grocery shop, a boy takes a packet of chips from the rack, but the chips start to fall from it because it has already been opened. While he is collecting the chips from the floor, a child comes to him and asks if he is stealing the snacks this way, but he disagrees. Suddenly, an urgent news announcement displays on the TV screen, informing them about a low-scale earthquake that is getting bigger with time. Just then, the floor of the shop begins to shake badly, quickly shifting the waves to the racks, causing the people to become startled. Suddenly, the ground in front of the shop bursts, leading huge stones and tons of sand to fall above people, filling the place with loud cries and screams. The child who was standing near the boy stares at everything with fear in her eyes, while the boy leans over her to protect her as they sit in the shop, which is now completely destroyed, with sand covering everything. The boy asks if she is all right, and she agrees. As he gets up, she looks behind him and becomes shocked, asking what it is. Confused, the boy turns around to see a huge tower in front of the shop that has emerged from the ground and stands tall in the middle of the city. This tower does not only appear in their country but simultaneously appears in major cities in different countries, including England and Japan. Soon after, these towers are named the Towers of Nightmare, and they start choosing people as tower walkers, inviting them inside. The people who accept the invitation are teleported to a battlefield and receive the blessings of the interface in the form of money, weapons, and skills similar to a game. However, after spending some time in the tower, they realize that it is not a game. In front of them is a huge screen showing the area right outside the tower, where a rescue operation is taking place, and they receive a notification that the tower impact will start soon. Meanwhile, outside the tower, a team of rescue workers is busy clearing up the area. Suddenly, one of them looks up and tells his fellow to look at a creature standing inside the tower, wondering if it is a human or a monster. They decide to call the police. Suddenly, the creature standing in the tower clenches its hands and opens its mouth, revealing its sharp teeth. In an instant, the creature lets out a loud cry, leading to a sudden overflow of monsters from the tower that enter the Earth's surface, causing what is now known as the Great Disaster. Sensing the danger, the bells start to ring, announcing an emergency situation, and people start to run in different directions to save their lives. To deal with the ambush, army troops are called in, and they use tanks and heavy ammunition to fire at the monsters. However, due to their size and overwhelming strength, the monsters destroy the entire troop in an instant. As a result of this deadly attack, widespread destruction occurs, and 1/3 of the world's population is annihilated. Meanwhile, the people who were inside the tower could do nothing but watch the destruction occur. After the disaster is over, they all receive a notification that they have been selected as tower walkers who can save this destroyed world. Considering that there is a chance for the world to be saved, they decide to climb up the tower, hoping that if they clear the tower, this nightmare will end. In this way, people with special powers and qualifications become the last hope of humanity to accomplish their goal. The tower walkers soon start to raid the tower in order to stop the annihilation of humanity. After climbing up a few floors, they come across a giant stone that blocks the entrance to the next floor and wonder if they cannot go any further. They contemplate destroying the stone but think that using violence would not work. Yet, they still try to do it using their weapons. However, as soon as they start striking the stone, small pieces of it start to fall apart and shine brightly, making them confused. The system informs them that it is a regression stone that can help them return to the time they were summoned while keeping their memories intact. Considering it a wonderful item, the captain of the Tower Walkers takes it in his hand and states that he will conduct this experiment on himself and tell them about it. As he uses the stone, a bright light engulfs him, forcing others to cover their eyes. After a while, when they all open their eyes, they are surprised to find that their captain has disappeared for real. Before we start the video, please don't be a baka and subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell. I will assure you your little effort will help me a lot. Now back to the video. In the captain's absence, the rest of the team members wonder if he can come back to the tower again. Just then, one of their team members, a former science professor, states that things in the tower might be more complex than they think. He explains that their captain has returned to the past of this world, but because a part of the timeline got split up, he may not be able to meet them again. He supports his belief with prominent theories like the multiverse theory and the parallel universe theory, proving that their situation is the result of the universe's timeline getting split up. By saying this, he means that the captain, after returning to the past, has become a totally different person from the captain that used to be in their world. Hearing that, all the other team members are consumed with disbelief, leading him to realize that they will not understand what he is saying. In simple words, he explains that their captain has returned to the past, but because of that, nothing in their world is going to change. He states that, according to his knowledge, the items in the tower do have such powers. Holding the regression stone, he states that it will return all of them to a world in a split timeline, but it is not necessary that everyone using the stone will end up in the same split timeline. He is of the view that the items in this tower exceed the common sense of humanity. Meanwhile, outside of the tower, the second tower impact occurs, leading to another deadly ambush of monsters that further destroys humanity. This makes it necessary for the walkers to make a decision before the entire human population on Earth is wiped out. At this point, a question arises regarding whether they will use the regression stones and return to the past to save themselves or if they will remain inside the tower and fight until their last breath. In the beginning, the walkers try their best to fight as much as they can. However, soon after, they realize that they are no match for the monsters and start to consume the regression stones one by one to return to the past. After some time, only the last member of the group of players is left inside the tower, while all others leave him, stating that this is the end for them in this world, feeling hopeless about humanity being saved. He sits in front of a formidable monster, ready to be consumed by it. However, all of a sudden, a powerful person arrives from behind and uses his weapon to cut the monster into pieces within an instant, leaving the person surprised. Approaching him, the powerful person asks if he is all right, and he agrees. When he turns behind him, he is amazed to see a group of powerful people walking towards him, while the person leading them asks if all others have run away. Coming closer, the rescuers commend him for holding on until the very end. Realizing that these people are their real hope, the person uses the regression stone and returns to the past, thinking that powerful people like them never get tempted by the return stones. After he disappears, the captain tells his group to go ahead and starts proceeding, leading humanity's last do-or-die squad, the Carp Team. Despite their unmatchable power and determination, the squad is soon destroyed, with all the members lying on the verge of death. Looking at his comrades, the captain of the group, stuck under the stones, wonders where it went wrong. He remembers that a few moments ago, a giant scarecrow-like monster attacked them, and his friend ran towards it to shift its attention while Jae-hwan, the captain, leaped up from behind. In a coordinated attempt, Jae-hwan severed the head of the monster with his sword while Young-won, his friend, used his weapons to cut the rest of its body into pieces. After killing the monster, he turned to Young-won, asking if there were any casualties, but he replied that there were none and the injured squad members would be fine after a little rest. Looking at their team members, Young-won stated that at this rate, it may be possible for them to reach the final floor, and they happily waved. While waving back, Jae-hwan suddenly noticed a unique sword lying on the ground. It was a suppressing dragon sword that was imbued with the energy of the sun and the moon and forged in 1,000 days by the master of the 85th floor to kill a dragon. Looking at the sword, Jae-hwan felt excited to have gotten such a powerful weapon and thought that just like Young-won said, if they continue like that, they will soon reach the final floor. Up until that moment, Jae-hwan thought that everything was going in their favor, but when they reached the chamber of purgatory on the 98th floor, they faced a powerful monster. This monster, which spewed lava from its mouth, injured all his comrades badly and melted their weapons. While he stood still looking at the condition of his squad members, the monster crashed him into a wall, causing him to experience immense pain as he began to lose consciousness. He thought that it was futile, remembering his team members and his friend, Yoon-won. He wondered if all that they went through together was supposed to end like this. Just then, the monster standing in front of him opened its mouth to throw lava at him. However, before it could do that, Yoon-won suddenly appeared from its side and launched an attack, causing it to experience immense agony. He told Jae-hwan to get a hold of himself, landed upon the monster's body, and pushed it downward while stating that he could not kill it on his own. Just then, the monster turned to him and launched a fierce counterattack, leaving Jae-hwan stunned. After a while, Young-won dropped his weapons from his blood-stained hands and hung upon the monster's sharp horn, about to be consumed by it. Shocked to see this, Jae-hwan started to call for Young-won out of worry, but before he could regain consciousness, the monster turned around and crashed its horn into the opposite wall. Seeing that, Jae-hwan became overwhelmed with anger, got up, held the sword, and ran towards the monster with a fierce intent in his eyes. Feeling a movement behind it, the monster turned around, but before it could do anything, Jae-hwan reached near it with great speed and launched an attack. After some time, the monster lies on the ground, turned into countless pieces, with lava flowing out of its body. Struggling to regain his breath, Jae-hwan turns to Young-won, telling him to proceed further. However, he finds Young-won lying on the ground, badly injured and holding a regression stone in his hand. Seeing that, Jae-hwan asks what he is doing, and Young-won apologizes to him. Jae-hwan remembers Young-won as a person who never lost his smile even within this dangerous tower, because of which he was nicknamed the Smile Knight by the Tower Walkers. Realizing that the same Smile Knight has lost his smile for the first time, Jae-hwan turns around, telling him to regress before he can change his mind, saying that he starts to walk away while Young-won keeps lying there. Looking at Jae-hwan, Young-won wonders if he has figured out his intention and looks at the bloodstained stone in his hand, remarking that it is too shabby. However, he changes his mind and starts to climb up the stairs, thinking that Jae-hwan is stronger than his expectations and is the one who has convinced him to do that. Trying to walk despite his fatal injuries, Young-won thinks that it is possible to reach the top floor of the tower if the walker is someone like Jae-hwan. Standing by the window, he states that he is relieved because of the presence of Jae-hwan in this world and jumps down. Meanwhile, Jae-hwan reaches the entrance of the next floor and is about to open the door when leaves start to fall upon him. These leaves give him a signal of what his friend has done, causing him to stay still for a while and then state that they should proceed forward together. With that, he opens the door to the 99th floor and is surprised to find a snow field in front of him. This makes him realize that the challenges he is going to face from then on will be of a different nature. Entering the snow field, Jae-hwan starts to proceed forward, feeling cold and exhausted. Suddenly, pointed spikes of ice start to emerge from the ground, causing Jae-hwan to run fast in order to save himself. While he is running away, facing a lot of pain, a dragon-like monster made of ice appears from the ground, asking if he has finally given up. Standing in front of it with his body injured due to the snow spikes, Jae-hwan smiles and asks if the monster is tired from fighting him already. Suddenly, a massive blast erupts in the snow, leading to the beginning of a relentless fight between Jae-hwan and the monster. After some time, under the frozen bodies of gigantic monsters, Jae-hwan hides with a piece of cloth in his mouth to avoid making a sound. Meanwhile, the monster searches for him around, asking if he has started to play hide and seek again. Sitting still in his place, Jae-hwan remembers that it has been 10 years since he reached the 99th floor. Putting medicine on his hand, he thinks that even though he faced numerous challenges on the 98th floor, the level of danger on this floor is incomparable to any of the lower levels. Feeling a lot of pain due to his injury, Jae-hwan thinks that the boss of the 99th floor, the Ice Dragon, possesses a breath that came from the Forgotten Land. It is something that is hard to withstand even with cold resistance at the highest possible level. He thinks that his only reason for survival for such a long time is the pieces of equipment that were left by the walkers who regressed. He remembers the suppressing dragon sword that he found on the 85th floor and the ice demon armor that Young-won gave him. He then looks at the Flame King's bracelet he got from his fellow Han Seal and closes his eyes, missing all of them. Remembering Seal, he apologizes to her for helplessly letting her die and thinks that if he were a little stronger, it would not have happened. Just then, someone calls out to him, and he opens his eyes, feeling shocked. He gets transported into one of his memories, where a blacksmith standing in front of him asks if he is thinking of challenging the tower again, and he agrees. He states that he really feels like he can beat the tower this time around. Hearing this, Jae, the blacksmith, turns to him, stating that it is really a relief to hear that. Jae belongs to a village named Adipose that was reclaimed after defeating the 50th floor's boss, Altaminus. Although it was a place where dead or injured walkers came in every day, the people never lost hope. The priests established emergency rescue units to save the walkers who were no longer able to fight. Meanwhile, the blacksmiths in the workshops created free equipment for the walkers who fought for the sake of humanity. Turning to Jae, Jae-hwan states that he seems to be the last blacksmith in Adipose. In response, Jae forbids him from reminding him of that, stating that Jae-hwan is the only customer he has, and the supplies do not come from the lower floors anymore these days. Hearing that, Jae-hwan thinks that this is something expected because there are almost no more living humans within the tower who can send supplies. Jae-hwan thinks that he does not know which year it is, but remembers that there have been at least 10 tower impacts till this time and people are no longer being invited inside the tower. Remembering that, he turns to Jae and asks if humans have been completely wiped out from Earth. After staying silent for a while, Jae asks if he doesn't get bothered by walking up and down the tower again and again. Hearing that, Jae-hwan remembers that at the place where the regression stone was discovered, there was a strange scribble on the wall reading "Tower within the tower, nightmare within nightmare." Considering that it could have been written by someone else and that he is not aware of its meaning, Jae-hwan holds his head, stating that there was nothing special inside. In response, Jae tells him that 2 days ago, a woman called Grandma Hylene disappeared, leaving him shocked. Jae-hwan thinks that there can only be 2 reasons for someone to disappear from the tower: regression to the past or jumping off the tower. He believes that Hylene, a skilled potion maker, and Jae, a skilled blacksmith, were 2 of the few support-type walkers that remained. Considering that he cannot let these talents completely disappear, Jae-hwan turns to Jae, asking him to teach him the blacksmith skills, which leaves him surprised. Remembering that conversation with Jae, Jae-hwan comes out of his hiding place and stands facing the ice dragon with confidence, while it asks if he is done playing hide and seek. The dragon states that no human has made it to the 99th floor alone ever since the tower was created, therefore it acknowledges Jae-hwan to be an incredible human. While Jae-hwan keeps on smiling, realizing that the last thing to acknowledge him is a monster, Jae-hwan opens his eyes, turns to the dragon, and states that he will feel very empty after killing it. In response, the dragon smiles, stating that it is impossible for him. However, Jae-hwan takes out his sword, stating that the dragon must not be very sure about it. Looking straight at the dragon, Jae-hwan states that even the icy armor that it is so proud of has started to crack. Hearing that, the dragon opens its mouth, calling Jae-hwan arrogant, and unleashes its deadly breath, directing it at Jae-hwan, who starts to run towards it without any fear of being killed. After a relentless battle in the snowfield, blood drips down Jae-hwan's body as he lies ensnared in the snow spikes. Meanwhile, the dragon stands in front of him and laughs at his resolve to fight till the end. The dragon states that even if Jae-hwan persistently tries to hold on, in the end, the fate that he will face will be overwhelming solitude and nothingness. Meanwhile, the snow spikes ensnaring his body start to mold into the bodies of his comrades who hold him tightly, calling out his name. Suddenly, Jae-hwan calls out to the dragon, opens his eyes, and states that it talks too much. With that, he breaks the snow spikes into pieces and charges at the dragon with his sword, leaving it bewildered. Looking at him, the dragon tells him to give up, stating that his skills are not enough to kill it. Meanwhile, Jae-hwan remembers that because he started raiding the tower later than other people, he failed to acquire hidden skills in classes every single time. That is why he gave up on other skills and completely focused on the thrust skill, which he practiced again and again and killed over 50 million monsters with. With time, his thrust kept growing faster, more precise, and stronger, surpassing a simple motion and gaining attack power comparable to a hidden skill that didn't consume any spirit power. However, considering that his opponent is a formidable ice dragon, he thinks the battle will be tough. Realizing that more than 100 thrusts by him have only created a scratch on its body, suddenly, the dragon opens its mouth to unleash its powerful breath, causing Jae-hwan to run away to dodge it. Barely dodging the attacks, Jae-hwan feels anxious, thinking that he will not be able to win against them if the battle continues at this rate. Just then, the dragon lands in front of him, calling him an unfortunate human. The dragon states that if there were 10 more humans like Jae-hwan, there would have been some chance for it to be defeated. The dragon reveals that if his race had not been fooled by the Dream Demon Stone, their fate would have been completely different, leaving him shocked. Confused about what the Dream Demon Stone is, Jae-hwan asks what it is talking about. However, instead of replying, the dragon raises its claw to hit him, but before it can hit, Jae-hwan runs away and leaves the snowfield. After getting out, Jae-hwan closes the door behind him, thinking that it was a very close attack that would have resulted in his death. Resting his head against the door, Jae-hwan remembers the words of the dragon about the Dream Demon Stone and opens his eyes. Having thought of something, 5 years later, Jae-hwan finally succeeds in killing the ice dragon and clears the 99th floor, leading to an utmost increase in his strength, stamina, skill level, martial ability, and dexterity. Taking a sigh, he flips through all the notifications while sitting above the body of the ice dragon. Turning to the ice dragon, he asks what the Dream Demon Stone is. In response, the dragon, which is on the verge of death, states that he already knows the answer and reveals that he will learn everything on the last floor. Just then, a unique sword flows down the dragon's body along with its blood, which turns out to be the ice dragon's sword imbued with its breath. Holding the strange-looking sword in his hand, Jae-hwan thinks that it does not look like a sword at all and wonders if it is a dagger. Just then, the blood of the dragon spilled on the snow rises up and forms a door in front of him, leading him to the final floor. Determined to conquer the tower, Jae-hwan enters the portal. When the words written about the door change from 100 to control room, a few moments after entering the door, Jae-hwan emerges from the other side of it. Looking in front of him, he is shocked to find countless screens displaying himself, Jae, Hyeon, and Adapose, his village. Looking at the screens, he wonders if this is what the current tower looks like and closely views the summoning area and his village. While he is gazing at those, he suddenly hears a voice remarking that he has finally come, while they were thinking that he would go to the town first. Hearing that, he quickly turns around, holding his sword, but sees no one. When the voice tells him not to be so tense, stating that they forgot to send an important notice, just then Jae-hwan receives the notification congratulating him for being the first one to clear the tutorial game of World 294. Reading this notification, Jae-hwan becomes shocked and confused about what it is. Suddenly, the blood of all the people that died in the tower starts to fill up the room and transform into a transparent water-like liquid, intensifying his shock. Just then, the invisible being that was talking to him steps out of one of the windows, stating that they would appreciate it if he did not sink too deeply into it. Suddenly, the liquid starts to rise up as if a storm has occurred, and when the person finally comes out, he remarks that at this rate, he is going to drown in his own emotions. The strange-looking creature wearing a suit remarks that it is a bit too late to inform him about the danger, but he should not be upset about it, since he held on very well for a human being. Meanwhile, the transparent blood starts to rain down on him in the form of huge droplets. However, the creature is shocked to notice that the blood does not even touch the body of Jae-hwan, instead, it forms a shield around him. Looking at Jae-hwan standing unharmed in the middle of the huge wave of blood, the creature remarks that he recovered faster than expected. Turning to the creature, Jae-hwan asks who it is. In response, the creature states that they started to talk without an introduction out of excitement to meet a person who was the first to reach the 100th floor of the tower. The creature reveals that he is the Devil Beastring and the owner of the Tower of Nightmares that Jae-hwan has just cleared. Hearing that, Jae-hwan asks if there is still the main game to go through if this tower was just a tutorial. Laughing, the creature compliments his cleverness and states that before the main game starts, he has something to show Jae-hwan. With that, he snaps his finger, causing countless more screens to appear in front of him. On the screens, Jae-hwan views all his experiences from entering the tower to forming his team to meeting more and more people on their way up the floors. Looking at those faces, the devil remarks that these are some familiar faces that they cannot see anymore. Jae-hwan also views himself as killing the dragon-like species with the help of Kohil and remembers that this was an unpredictable battle in which Seoyeol died, leaving him in tears. This is followed by the memory of Young Won's death, which causes him to become overwhelmed. After showing these to him, the devil asks if these memories do not bring his sadness, rage, and regrets back, telling him to leave those useless emotions behind. The devil states that he will give Jae-hwan a new opportunity and offers him to play this game again. The devil calls it an amazing privilege, just like the protagonist of the novels who can start from the very beginning with all their memories intact. This realization makes Jae-hwan understand that it is not the end and that humanity cannot be saved by simply climbing to the top of the tower. He remembers the initial invitation to the tower, supposedly for saving humanity, and realizes that they were tricked from the start. It dawns on him that no matter what methods they try, it was impossible to stop the tower's impact. He realizes that all they could do was try to conquer the tower, and the idea of salvation for humanity was nothing more than wishful thinking. With this in mind, Jae-hwan turns to the devil and firmly states that they know very well that he will never go back to the past. Hearing that, the devil bursts into laughter, mocking Jae-hwan for still clinging to the idea of returning to the past. The devil then reveals that no matter what item one uses from the tower, nothing can send them back to the past. Shocked by this revelation, Jaehwan initially insists that there is a regression stone in the tower that sends people back to the past. However, he suddenly remembers the words of the ice dragon about the demon dreamstone and realizes that it was actually referring to the regression stones. Just then, the devil informs him that it was actually not a regression stone but a nightmare stone. He reveals that the people who used the nightmare stone were not sent back to the past but were trapped in a dream conjured by the stone. He explains that he came up with the idea of introducing such an item on the 77th floor when he noticed a race fixated on returning to the past. After processing this information, Jaehwan stays quiet for a while and then decides to believe whatever he is told. After a while, the devil asks if they should begin the main game and sends a notification asking if he would like to enter the main game, expecting Jaehwan to accept it. However, to his shock, Jaehwan instantly declines the notification, stating that the devil has helped him understand the true nature of the tower. Jaehwan declares that he is already in a nightmare created by the tower and will not remain in it any longer. Instead, he firmly states his intention to hunt the devil itself and continue climbing up to the next floor, just as he has been doing. Upon hearing Jaehwan's intention to kill him and enter the next floor, B-String confidently declares that there is nothing beyond the 100th floor, as that's where the tower ends. However, Jaehwan firmly states that he will no longer believe what the devil says, growing more resolute in his decision. Anxious to convince Jaehwan, the devil tries to reason with him, but Jaehwan responds by slashing his sword at the devil's neck, severing his head. With his head detached, the devil asks Jaehwan what he desires, offering to grant him anything he wants as a reward for his actions. However, Jaehwan calmly replies that he does not need anything. In response, the devil, with his head starting to re-emerge, asks if Jaehwan doesn't wish to return to his original world. The devil explains that just like the Tower of Nightmares was a dream, in reality, there was no tower impact on the world. This revelation leaves Jaehwan shocked, and countless more screens appear, showing him what is happening in the real world. He witnesses people going about their daily routines, appearing perfectly normal, and realizes that B-String is telling the truth. Meanwhile, B-String laughs at Jaehwan's expressions, stating that he seems to have understood his situation and asking if it is not astonishing to realize that nobody has died in reality. He remarks that the news of his friends and family being perfectly fine must be a relief for him. Just then, B-String realizes he almost forgot to show Jaehwan the most important thing and directs his attention to a screen displaying countless patients who lie unconscious. Closely looking at the patients, Jaehwan realizes that one of them is himself, while B-String asks if the reason for his surprise is his spotless appearance. B-String reveals that even though decades have passed in the tower, in the real world, it has only been a month. After showing him the screens, B-String states that Jaehwan will never be able to win against him, as the power gap between them is as large as the one between humans and dragons. Considering it a relief, Jaehwan holds his sword again, stating that if B-String is like a dragon, then he has already hunted one before. With that, he charges at the devil with his sword, intent on killing him. Sometime later, Jaehwan opens the door of Jay's workshop and enters in a badly injured state, calling out to him. However, to his surprise, the workshop is filled with cobwebs as if closed for a long time, and there is no sign of Jay anywhere. Realizing that he cannot receive Jay's help, Jaehwan starts to forward to weapon himself. Here, he calls that it has been 72 days since he challenged B-String but is unable to even leave a scratch on him, no matter how hard he tries. However, what is more surprising is the fact that he did not die himself, either, as B-String does not seem to have any intention of killing him. This is the reason why he feels determined to spend as much time as it takes to defeat the devil. Meanwhile, B-String, busy watching Jaehwan on his screens, thinks that he will have to hold back since Jaehwan is a very special product that he is going to sell. He remarks that as the cultivator, it is his first time seeing something like that. He reiterates the process of making his products by first choosing the strongest people from among the groups that enter the tower, which is done through the tutorial stage. After filtering them, the chosen people, referred to as the products, begin to truly grow through the real game, which is the secondary process of growing his products. However, in the case of a product like Jaehwan, who refuses to advance to the next stage, B-String wonders whether to simply kill him. He thinks that killing Jaehwan inside the tower will not destroy his soul but will harm the soul of Jaehwan due to the difference between them, which would enrage the harvesters. Therefore, he decides to raise Jaehwan flawlessly, sell him to a high-ranking devil, and repay the loan for purchasing the tower. Looking at Jaehwan on the screen, he thinks that he is such a special product that even the divine beings who do not deal with the devils have contacted him. However, he feels very annoyed by Jaehwan's continuous efforts to win against him and wonders if he never gets tired of that. He states that if Jaehwan listens to him and starts the real game, it would be much better for him. Wondering what Jaehwan wants to accomplish with his current actions, realizing that Jaehwan is never going to stop, the devil snaps his finger and disappears, leaving Jaehwan surprised. After a while, he appears behind Jaehwan, who quickly turns around and hits the wall behind him, injuring himself in the process. Feeling increasingly frustrated, B-String holds Jaehwan tightly and asks him to explain what he wants and why he is insisting on doing something pointless while ignoring his offers to receive rewards. In response, Jaehwan simply states that he wants to hunt the devil and enter the next floor, intensifying B-String's frustration. Looking at the state B-String is in, Jaehwan smiles, thinking that he has finally pushed the devil to his breaking point, and states that there is something he wants to ask. Revealing that there is one main dimensional level called the Almighty Land, under which there are countless alterations. The devil reveals that Earth is just a small planet in a dimensional system scattered among the countless alterations referred to by them as the 294th world. He explains that in the tower, the walkers earn skills and items and adapt to the system of the Almighty Land while working on their status. They get a chance to travel to another world. He reveals that in all that process, devils like him have the role of supporting such games. In response, Jaehwan asks why he is doing something like that. Hearing that, B-String remarks that he is actually curious about why the Earth was chosen among the alterations for the tower impact and why he was forced to face such a fate. He explains that it only happened by chance that their planet was chosen. But Jaehwan stops him, stating that what he wants to know is why a devil is operating the tower. Surprised, B-String stares at him while Jaehwan goes on to ask what he gains from doing this kind of work. Feeling a little nervous, B-String states that he can call it the volunteer work that creatures like him do. Looking at Jaehwan's expressions, he adds that Jaehwan does not seem to believe whatever he is saying, but it is the truth that devils enjoy volunteering a lot. He explains that it happens on many different planets where the devils watch over the walkers and live in paradise alongside them. After giving a long explanation and justification, B-String remarks that Jaehwan must have believed him till now. In response, Jaehwan smiles, calling it all pointless talk. After some time, Jaehwan sits in the snowfield, looking at his status window and finds all these skills to have reached their maximum level. Drinking a potion to heal his injuries, he realizes that he does not have any more skills to level up, yet he is still unable to defeat B-String. Lying on the snow, he wonders if humans can really be reduced to nothing and thinks that it might be possible in the system of this strange world. Suddenly, he experiences a strange feeling and becomes surprised, wondering what it was. Just then, he begins to see fine particles floating in the air that slowly start to grow bigger, and he considers it to be a hallucination. As he holds one of them in his hand, it quickly dissipates into the air, forming different shapes. Observing them, Jaehwan comes to the conclusion that these particles are the essence of this world, regardless of their form. Suddenly, he gets the message that the monarch will cultivate and accept supplies for him soon, which piques his curiosity. Going back to B-String, he asks if the monarch is a king, causing him to remark that Jaehwan has finally gained interest in that. B-String explains that the monarchs of the beholders of the Great Land and the people who clear the game proceed to the Great Land and receive power and support from the monarchs. While Jaehwan expresses his confusion about getting power and support, B-String continues to explain that depending on what monarch he chooses, his future will change as well. He says that if Jaehwan follows what he is saying, he will use all of his power to help him go under a great monarch. However, it only applies if he is willing to participate in the main game until the end. After hearing all that, Jaehwan remarks that he sounds like an insurance salesperson who persuades people, making him feel a little embarrassed. After that, Jaehwan agrees to follow what he is saying but states that he will leave the place after 10 days. 9 days later, while Jaehwan is busy with swordsmanship training, B-String watches him on the screen, remarking that he does this useless thing all day long. Although he feels frustrated, he thinks that he needs to be a little more patient since the time is almost over. Recalling that he had to buy the tower because he was deceived by these people, he feels enraged at them. He remembers that the tower was said to have been personally built by a master and was an antique first-generation tower where its age could not be guessed. He thinks that if it were a third-generation tower, there would have been a function to forcibly end the tutorial without damaging the prizes. However, since it is a first-generation tower, he cannot end the game without agreement on the prizes, which intensifies his frustration. Considering that he bought a first-generation tower because it was a little cheaper than others, he thinks that all he can do is be patient and wait until the next day. Finally, the last day comes, and B-String happily gives all the information about the main game to Jae-won, who thanks him in return. Displaying the invitation to the main game on the window again, B-String tells him to choose the accept button this time. Feeling overjoyed that this day has finally come, however, to his surprise, instead of accepting the invitation, Jae-won gives him a sudden blow, causing him to get confused. As he stands with Jae-won's sword pierced into his body, he asks what Jae-won is doing. In response, Jae-won states that he should know by looking, reveals that his true intention is to hunt him, and launches another attack. Jae-won remembers that after seeing those shiny particles, the stabbing motion of this sword has become unstable, leading him to experience a feeling of discomfort whenever he tries to stab. While he is thinking that, B-String raises his hand in the air to hit him. However, using a swift motion of his sword, he severs B-String's arm and thinks that this feeling of discomfort is actually a sense of being alive. However, just then, huge and strong vines made of steel emerge from the floor and trap Jae-won inside while healing his severed arm. B-String states that he has never seen a human like Jae-won before, remarking that it would have been easier for the both of them if it was like that sooner. In response, Jae-won, who is completely trapped inside the steel vines, asks what B-String is going to do, stating that he will not be able to finish the game without his consent. Agreeing to it, B-String states that he gave up on getting his consent a long time ago. Turning to Jae-won, B-String asks why he expects the game to continue indefinitely. He reveals that this tower is programmed to end automatically 100 days after the tutorial is cleared, which leaves Jae-won shocked. Saying that, he turns around, stating that he just needs to hold on to Jae-won and get him to participate quietly in the main game after 100 days. Holding his sword tightly, Jae-won calls out to B-String, stating that in the Great Land, he is called the Shrine of Teasing. Jae-won goes on to reveal that B-String has lived 784 years, has gone around a total of 128 worlds, and has continued his cultivation among the targeting tribes, which leaves him shocked. Jae-won states that B-String was actually planning on handing him over to the jet black monarch called the Mathematician. Shocked at the fact that he knows everything, B-String asks who he actually is. In response, Jae-won smiles and reveals that he is the prize that B-String has been nurturing in the tower for many years. After that, he breaks the vines into pieces, stating that it will not continue anymore. After breaking the vines into pieces, Jae-won emerges from within and charges forward at great speed, making B-String bewildered. Reaching near him, Jae-won strikes his formidable sword into the devil's shoulder, causing him to experience extreme pain for the first time. After running behind Jae-won for some time, B-String finally comes face to face with him. Holding his injured shoulder, he feels shocked at the wound getting worse instead of healing itself and remarks that it is something impossible. Looking at the formidable sword in Jae-won's hand, B-String becomes increasingly shocked, recognizing it to be the overload adapter. Jae-won reveals that the day after he reached the 100th floor of the tower, he had doubts regarding the place, the devil's power, and his own strength as a human being. Soon after, the essence of the world was torn apart, and his doubts started to decrease. Finally, he reached a stage where he had no more doubts. Saying that, he launches another deadly attack, causing the devil to drift backward. Realizing that he has no other choice, B-String lifts the temporal restrictions and shows his true devil-like appearance. After that, he charges at Jae-won, stating that he will not be going easy on him anymore and telling Jae-won to surrender. Reaching Jae-won, B-String uses his sharp nails to hurt his face and starts to tear his body apart, causing blood to spurt out. Doing that, he states that although Jae-won is quite amazing, even he has his limits and cannot fight against a devil like him. With that, countless thorns emerge from the ground, piercing through Jae-won's body and making him wonder if this is how it is going to end, with blood dripping down his hands. He holds the ice dragon's sword tightly while the time of the tutorial reaches its final countdown. Meanwhile, B-String walks towards him, stating that he will need to participate in the main game no matter what. However, as soon as he reaches near Jae-hwan, the countdown finishes, and a bright light emerges from the sword that knocks B-String off his feet. Getting on his feet, Jae-hwan recalls killing the formidable monsters on the lower floors and charges at B-String, resolute on hunting him as well. Looking at the sword's power, B-String feels shocked, realizing that it is not merely an adaptation. While the sword starts to emit lightning strikes that tear his body into pieces, this leads to experiencing immense agony, and he crashes to the ground. While Jae-hwan reaches out to him, stating that humans aren't things that they can just trade around, Jae-hwan states that they are not insignificant baselines that they can just use as they please and digitize, and they are not the products that are sold for money. Bringing his sword near B-String's eye, Jae-hwan states that he will no longer follow the scenario planned by them. Instead, he states his intention to destroy the place, climb up to the next floor, keep going up further, and destroy this entire world made by devils like them. Hearing that, B-String starts to implore him to stop, saying that there is no such thing as the next level. However, Jae-hwan insists that the next level exists and reveals that he was not simply called there. He remembers finding the scribblings on stones and walls while climbing up the floors and calls them the scribblings of a certain artist's anguish. He remembers reading a scribble on the 47th floor when he wondered if the entire tower was just an imitation of the first demon, the top of the illusion tree. He remembers finding a signal like that on many of the floors and coming to the conclusion that these scribblings were done by the creator of the tower. Remembering those signals to the illusion tree, Jae-hwan turns to B-String and asks if this place is the root of the illusion tree, remarking that if this is the root, there must be a trunk as well. Looking at the ceiling, Jae-hwan states that he might find a way by breaking it and uses his sword to completely destroy the roof, causing B-String to feel shocked at the destruction of his tower. As the ceiling starts to break, the system quickly senses the error, checks for other walkers in the tower, and after finding no one, it ends the tutorial session. After some time, Jae-hwan is transported to an island-like place where he remarks that he has finally found the next floor. While he is looking around the island, numerous gigantic beasts suddenly appear from within the trees and surround him while he stands still holding his sword. Suddenly, one of the beasts leaps up to attack him, but he uses a slight thrust of his sword without even moving from his place to cut the beast's body into two pieces. After killing the beast, he turns around and finds another one behind him, which is way bigger than the previous one. Considering that a slight thrust will not be enough for such a big monster, Jae-hwan holds his sword tightly and launches a normal thrust that tears the beast apart into pieces. After killing all of them, Jae-hwan cuts their horns and gathers them, thinking that the monsters on this floor are much weaker compared to the previous ones. While he is doing that, he suddenly hears a voice and turns around to find creatures similar to aliens expressing their anger at his act of killing the beasts. Turning to his fellows, the creature leading the group commands them in a code language that Jae-hwan is unable to understand. Understanding the word horn in his command, Jae-hwan asks if they want the horns and offers to make a deal where he will give them the horns in exchange for information about the place. However, without listening to him, the creatures rush forward at great speed and try to launch an attack. Jae-hwan manages to dodge and warns them that if they try to attack him again, he will kill them all. However, after some time, he realizes that they are not going to stop, so he takes a sigh and kills them all. After dealing with them, he approaches the head of the group lying on the ground on the brink of death and asks about the place they are in. In response, the creature starts to express his surprise at Jae-hwan's power in the same code language. Getting frustrated, Jae-hwan grabs him by the antennas emerging from his head, causing him to scream and demands that he speak in a language he can understand. In response, the creature bites his own tongue and dies, leaving Jae-hwan to realize that they have strong willpower even greater than his expectations. Looking at the broken antennas in his hand, he makes a pile of sand and places them inside. After that, he starts searching for any valuable items that can provide him with the information he seeks. While searching, he finds a small pouch that turns out to be a small dimensional backpack capable of storing a large number of items in a limited space. Considering it to be similar to an inventory, Jae-hwan remarks that it is a good item as he has been unable to use the interface system since he got out of the tower. Putting the horns inside the pouch, he thinks that he expected to use the interface system of other dimensional worlds like the Almighty Land, which turned out to be nothing more than a lie. He also finds several multicolored stones of different shapes in their possession, which turn out to be spirit stones that can possibly increase a certain amount of spirit energy. Collecting the stones from all of the creatures, Jae-hwan looks at them, remarking that all the creatures had one of these stones. Considering them to be valuable, he puts them in the backpack as well. Turning to the dead bodies of the beasts, Jae-hwan thinks that he has so many things to store and wonders if he should simply throw the beasts away. After some time, he proceeds forward and starts to collect all the items he can find on the island, including different weapons, fruits, and other edible items. While looking around the island, Jae-hwan comes across a map and opens it up, realizing that it is the map to the illusion tree, which is referred to as chaos. Looking at the map, he thinks that this is a place that was not available in the information that the devil gave him. Meanwhile, in another part of the island, the same gigantic beasts are in the middle of a battle against a group of humans led by a woman with a cruel smile on her face. She throws her dagger in the direction of the beast, which accidentally strikes a member of her group. Apologizing for that, she states that she is going to hunt separately from them and walks away. While the injured person feels enraged at her clumsy moves, after a while, they hear her voice again and turn around, feeling shocked. In front of them comes a gigantic Bjorn beast, following the woman, making them realize that she has disturbed such a formidable creature and is bringing danger to them. While they are contemplating how to deal with it, Jae-hwan watches them, remarking that the woman looks the strongest among them and wondering if they are on bad terms with each other. He thinks that they are going to die if it continues like that and wonders how they manage to clear the Tower of Nightmares with their skill level. Just then, the person who got injured by the woman's dagger unleashes his skill, the breath of the Fire King, and directs it towards the beast. The woman also intervenes again, stating that she will also help, but instead of launching an attack on the beast, she hits the same person again, causing his attack to get disoriented. Laughing at her mistake, she apologizes once again, while the person expresses his anger at her clumsy moves, calling her rude for not acknowledging his help. Meanwhile, the beast reaches near him and opens its mouth to attack the person without him noticing. However, before the beast can attack, Jae-hwan jumps down from the place he was standing and uses a slight thrust to pierce his sword through the beast's head. This causes blood to spurt out of the beast's head and stain the person's face as they try to look between the clouds of dust forming due to the beast's fall. They find a formidable sword pierced through the beast's head finally, and as the dust begins to settle, Jae-hwan appears from within, holding the sword, making them confused about his identity. Considering that the Bjorn is dead, they start discussing among themselves if it would be okay for them to take the corpse of the beast. Hearing their discussion, Jae-hwan asks if this monster is something important. In response, one of them reveals that it is so strong that it takes more than 10 people to defeat it, which makes him realize that the more horns a monster has, the stronger it is. Just then, the woman who has been observing Jae-hwan for some time walks up to him and asks who he is, remarking that there is no adapter in the region of chaos who can kill a Bjorn with a simple thrust. She asks where he has come from. Hearing that, Jae-hwan turns to her and asks what chaos is, leaving her surprised at his lack of knowledge about it. Not knowing about that, Jae-hwan starts to walk away with the group, telling them that he does not belong to this place but was just passing by, and he does not know any of the languages spoken in this region. Hearing that, the leader of the group feels surprised, remarking that it is very strange for a language barrier to exist in such a region. After a while, they ask him again if he is okay with them taking the Bjorn corpse, and he agrees. While they are talking, the woman stays quiet, thinking that even though the person claims to be a passerby, the way he killed a Bjorn with a single strike without using any skill seems strange. She finds it very difficult to use her powers to figure out his identity and comes to the conclusion that his spirit power is similar to that of a non-adapter. Wondering who he exactly is, she calls out to him, saying that she has a question for him. She states that there are less than a handful of adapters throughout chaos who can kill a Bjorn with a single thrust, and she demands to know who he is and where he has come from. In response, he repeats his counter-question, asking what chaos exactly is. Hearing that, she expresses frustration and asks if he does not understand what she is saying and sarcastically asks if asking for an introduction is a hard thing to understand. In response, Jae-hwan states that he does understand her query. However, the question of who he is brings back memories of his childhood, his school days, and his life spent on Earth. He thinks that all of those memories became meaningless after he entered the tower and gained new comrades and memories in return. However, as that tutorial came to an end, all of those disappeared as if they were a mirage. Jae-hwan believes that although all these comrades may be somewhere on Earth, they will be strangers to him because the memories he received as a reward are something they lack. After contemplating everything, Jae-hwan turns to the woman and claims that he does not remember anything. In response, the woman starts shouting at him, stating that she doesn't believe his claim of having amnesia. However, Jae-hwan clarifies that he never claimed to have amnesia, but the woman insists it doesn't matter and asks if he is the mighty of the abyss, leaving him confused about what that is. Feeling annoyed by her countless questions, he tells her to stop, stating that he has what he wants to know and puts his hand in the backpack. After a while, he pulls out the ice dragon sword and shows it to her, shocking her as she realizes he possesses a spirit weapon. This leads her to understand that he didn't defeat the beast just because of his strength, but because he had a potent weapon. Just then, the other members of the group also turn to him, surprised by the fact that he possesses a spirit weapon. While he puts it back inside the backpack, meanwhile, feeling angry at her group for jeopardizing her mission, the woman thinks she could have completed it without them. Suddenly, an idea strikes her, and she turns to Jae-hwan, offering him a proposition and asking if he wants to hear it. Subsequently, she gives him a detailed explanation of what chaos is, and they proceed to discuss the party. She reveals that the people accompanying her are a heinous group aligned to a clan named Red Fox, and she wants Jae-hwan to kill them. She states that they are dangerous people who might also attempt to kill him, making him feel surprised. After some time, the sky becomes dark, and one of the members of the group suggests that they stay there for the night since walking in the dark might make them vulnerable to the beasts. After deciding to stay at that location, they light a fire and sit around it to rest. Jae-hwan, who lies under a tree, looks at the shining particles in the air above him and thinks that the village is close to their current location according to the map. As he holds one of the particles in his hand, he receives a notification that he has achieved the second stage of awakening and can now comprehend what people are talking or thinking about. Using this new skill, he learns about the discussion of the group about him and finds out that they consider him to be a mediocre person who can only kill big monsters due to his weapon. Hearing their conversation, Jae-hwan realizes that their intentions are not good and thinks that they would be scared if they knew that he got this weapon from the root of the illusion tree. He also feels surprised that people are aiming for the equipment in the tower, which doesn't seem very valuable to him. Looking at the starry sky, he thinks that this place doesn't seem to be the almighty land. Just then, the group of people sitting around the fire gets up and starts running towards him. While he keeps lying down calmly, observing his calm demeanor, the woman asks why he is lying like that, pointing out that people are coming towards him. Pulling him up, she suggests that he use the sword that devours things to get rid of the enemies, but he states that he doesn't have it because he lent it to someone who wanted to inspect it. Just then, the group reaches him and surrounds him, while their leader states that he will make good use of that sword. In response, the woman states that they cannot harm him until she is with him. The members of the opposite group remark that they have been called to kill just 2 people and express their desire to get rid of them and return soon. In response, the woman questions if they truly want to see bloodshed and prepares herself for the fight, finally revealing her true powers. Just as the members of the group charge at them, the woman rushes forward, hitting them all with incredible speed and knocking them to the ground. She then throws a dagger at one of them, which pierces into his forehead, leading to his death, stating that she is very angry at the moment. She throws countless daggers in the direction of the other group members, stating that from then on, all of them are going to suffer a terrible fate. Realizing that her intention was to kill them from the beginning, the leader of the group states that they should have understood it when she lured the monsters to them. Feeling enraged, he asks who it was that made the request to the Shadow Warriors. In response, she states that it doesn't matter because they have killed so many innocent people, which has made them a target for many people, and she throws daggers in their direction. The head of the opposite group laughs in response, stating that there is no way the Shadow Warriors would move for such pathetic people, and he breaks all of her daggers into pieces. Holding Jae-hwan's formidable sword, the person states that she must have received a private request which will lead her to be killed by them. As she looks at the sword, she remarks that he wants to face her with a spirit weapon, while he laughs, stating that he has taken all precautions. Just then, more people start to appear around him, and she realizes that all of them are skilled adapters and number at least 40. This makes her surprised, while the leader states that he had to take at least this much precaution for fighting against a shadow warrior and a person who killed the Bjorn in a single strike. He goes on to say that if he knew he would get the spirit weapons so easily, he would not have called his master to join the fight. Just then, a gigantic hybrid human creature appears behind them, which the woman recognizes to be the black fox. She asks if he has such free time to take part in small fights. In response, the black fox tells her to consider it an honor to meet him, calling her the Witch of Massacre. He states that over half of the Red Fox clan has gathered to hunt her down, while his clan members charge at her, remarking that it is really an honor for her. The woman states that since he has so much free time, he should wait and see. However, she secretly thinks that she is not certain about beating him in a one-on-one battle since he is a third-stage adapter. Turning to Jae-won, she apologizes and states that she will not be able to protect him. She throws a nightmare stone in his direction, telling him to take it and run. Holding it in his hand, Jae-won asks what it is, and the woman replies that it is a return stone using which he can escape to the nearest castle. She explains that it's the only one she has and tells him to use it, leaving him confused. He realizes that it is not a stone that can transport someone to the past but a stone that can save someone in the present, and he closes his hand tightly around it, remembering Youngwon's tragic end. Jae-won thinks that if instead of that fake stone, he had given this stone to Yoonwon, he would have been saved. Turning to the woman, he asks if she would choose to return to the past if she had the chance. Hearing the question, the woman states that this is not the time to ask such things and firmly replies that she would definitely not go back to the past. She believes she has tried her best in life, and if she is going to die, it will be on that day, and she will accept it without seeking to change the past. In response, Jae-won places his hand on her shoulder, reassuring her that she is not going to die that day. He then takes out his suppressing dragon sword, surprising her, and quickly leaps up to launch an attack while she keeps standing there. Using his sword, he strikes down all the enemies that come his way and keeps moving forward. Observing this, the Black Fox activates his skill, the Flame King's 14 formation, charging the weapons of all his clan members with his power. However, Jae-won counters with his skill, the Lost Enchantment, effortlessly killing the entire group within moments without them realizing what has happened. Finally reaching the Black Fox, Jae-won pierces the sword into the creature's claw, causing immense agony. This leaves the leader of the group in utter shock. After killing the Black Fox, Jae-won steps towards him and brings his hand forward. As Jae-won retrieves his spirit sword from the person, the remaining members of the group start to run away to save their lives. Meanwhile, Jae-won tightly grasps the sword and uses the light stab to raise a tornado-like storm that tears the bodies of the fleeing people into pieces. Witnessing this overwhelming power, the woman feels shocked. She recalls that when Jae-won allowed the group to take the Bjorn corpse, she considered him a fool who made himself vulnerable to them and had no sense of danger. Contrary to her expectations, Jae-won turns out to be a very strong person in reality. While thinking about this, she calls out to him and asks what his real identity is. In response, Jae-won smiles and asks if she has already forgotten, stating that she knows his identity. Observing her expressions, he jokingly asks if she is also suffering from memory loss like him, which annoys her. Afterwards, she requests that he give her back the return stone she had given him earlier, but he informs her that he has lost it. Frustrated, she questions how he could lose such a valuable item, but he simply starts to walk away. After a while, he sits near the fire, finding the surroundings somewhat peaceful. Meanwhile, the woman continues searching for her return stone in the vicinity and in his backpack but is unable to find it, which intensifies her frustration. Jae-won turns to her and states that she already knows his identity, leaving her confused about what he is talking about. He clarifies that his identity is that he is a human, causing her to remark if he is messing with her as she sits down by the fire. Jae-won asks if she is a human, and she agrees, stating that he is almost a human. Hearing that, Jae-won clenches his fist, calling it great, while she stares at him in confusion, wondering what is on his mind. Sitting quietly beside him, she contemplates whether being a human is enough to succeed. Walking away, the woman asks if Jaehwan really does not have any memories of being in the Almighty Land when he was coming to chaos, and he agrees. Hearing that, the woman states that she is very envious of him because he lost all his memories. Feeling confused, Jaehwan inquires what is so good about losing memories. In response, she states that most people in chaos would be envious of him because it is obvious why most people come to chaos. Hearing that, Jaehwan turns to her and asks how she ended up there. In response, she stops walking and turns to him, stating that if he comes to know what he is asking, he will regret it a lot. After a long walk, they finally reach a place called Gorgon Fortress, and the woman remarks that it is a village. While walking towards the fortress, he comes across a place that resembles the summoning ground on the first floor of the tower and wonders what it is. Just then, a faint light begins to emerge from the area, leading to the appearance of countless people imploring to be saved. Jaehwan realizes that this place is actually the summoning ground for the dead, while the woman remarks that he must have found the answer to how she ended up in chaos. She advises him not to ask this question to anyone in this place and welcomes him to the world of the dead. Curious, Jaehwan asks if one dies in the Almighty Land, do they come to chaos after that, and she agrees, stating that after dying in chaos, it is really the end, and the people turn into nutrients for the illusion tree. Suddenly, guards walk out of the fortress, holding clothes, and instruct the newly summoned people to form a line, stating that they will be taken to the speech hall. While they are distributing clothes among the people, the woman calls out to one of them, addressing him as James. Turning to her, James asks why she is suddenly at the northern checkpoint, and she replies that she was just passing by and asked to be led in quickly, stating that they are aware of her identity. Addressing her as Mino, the person apologizes and states that they are instructed to check that everyone going into the fortress must have identification. Turning to Jaehwan, she asks if he has his identification, and he tells her that he does not, realizing it would be difficult to enter without it. She goes to James and states that she forgot to bring her identification with her, offering him the horn of a biorn. She asks him to make do with it, and James loudly states that he has checked her identification and allows her to enter. After that, he turns to Jaehwan, asking him to show his identification, but Jaehwan reveals that he does not have any and asks what would happen in such a situation. In response, Mino explains that he is in trouble, and if he requests her help, she can assist him in getting out of this situation. Meanwhile, James clarifies that without proper identification, one cannot enter the fortress. Hearing that, Jaehwan stands still, leaving Mino worried about his intentions, suspecting that he might be thinking of killing the guards and entering the fortress. However, before she can do it, someone arrives from behind, asking what the matter is, leaving Mino shocked and anxious. Seeing the person, the soldiers quickly form a line and salute him. Mino reveals that he is the most famous person in the fortress and the cleanest checkpoint captain in Chaos, Carlton. Meanwhile, Carlton approaches James and asks about the problem, and James explains that Jaehwan wants to enter the fortress but doesn't have identification. Looking at Jaehwan, Carlton states that he cannot enter, prompting him to ask why. In response, Carlton says that as the captain, he has the authority to restrict people from entering who lack proper identification and refers to the law of Gorgon to support his claim. After that, the guards bowed down in front of Carlton as a gesture of acknowledgement, while the ones who did not show respect were forced by him to kneel down. Just then, Jaehwan grabs his sword and tells Carlton to stop holding his sword. Jaehwan states that he doesn't care about what the law says and asks what is written on the identification. Surprised, Carlton explains that the identification contains the person's name, occupation, skill, partial status, criminal records, and many other such things. Hearing that, Jaehwan declares that he doesn't need the identification and will not be verifying himself. Considering that his skill of law is not working on Jaehwan, Carlton states that he will be restraining him and uses his skill of silver light restraint. Suddenly, strong chains start to appear in his surroundings and ensnare Jaehwan. However, with a single move of his arm, Jaehwan breaks the chains into pieces. Witnessing this, all the guards, as well as Carlton himself, feel shocked at his strength. Meanwhile, Jaehwan points to Mino and asks if he can't do what she did, making her feel nervous. Fearing he will reveal her bribery, feeling anxious, she tries to stop him. But Jaehwan quickly takes out a crystal and throws it at Carlton. Seeing this, James, who accepted the bribe from Mino, starts to shout at Jae-hwan out of fear and suggests to Carlton that he should execute him immediately. Looking at the crystal, the captain asks if his name is Jae-hwan, and he agrees. In response, the captain smiles and states that he was waiting for him, calling him the emissary of the Dear Whisperer. As a step in identity verification, the captain goes on to check Mino's spiritual corruption level, which exceeds 15%, and recommends she medicate as soon as possible. Showing her the test results, Carlton remarks that she knows what she has to do, and she agrees. Meanwhile, Jae-hwan feels confused about what spiritual corruption is, causing Mino to remark that he does not know anything. Mino explains that spiritual corruption is a disease that every inhabitant of chaos gets, and it keeps on increasing just by existing there, which is why the horn of a horned beast is valuable. She adds that James was charmed by it because the horns are the only medicinal ingredient that can ease spiritual corruption in chaos. While she is telling this, Carlton comes near Jae-hwan, stating that he needs to evaluate him and brings the tool to test the spiritual corruption near him. As he brings the tool near Jae-hwan, it starts to beep, indicating that the spiritual corruption of this individual cannot be measured. Shocked at the tool showing an error, the captain, as well as the guards, stare at Jae-hwan. However, soon after, the tool displays the spiritual corruption to be 0%, causing the captain to smile. Taking Jae-hwan's hand, the captain states that he will be returning the crystals to him since the verification is over, and puts them in his hands, causing Jae-hwan to ask if he does not need them. In response, Carlton states that these crystals are not something he should easily hand over to someone else, addressing him as the envoy of green purists. Holding the crystals, Jae-hwan states that he is not the envoy of green purists that the captain is referring to, making Carlton smile. Stating that he knows it, Carlton allows them to enter, causing James to ask if it is okay to send them away like that. In response, Carlton states that the crystals Jae-hwan possesses are not ordinary items and, along with increasing individual spiritual power, they have many more functions. With that, Carlton removes the gloves from his hand, revealing that his hand is badly burned, causing James to realize that it happened because of the crystals. Carlton reveals that only a person from the Green Purist clan can wield the Spectre crystals. Carlton states that although Jae-hwan does not look like a member of the Green Purists, he can still wield the Spectre crystals, which has led him to trust his spirit. He reminds James of the time when they checked Jae-hwan's spiritual corruption level, and it showed an error even though the measurement device never makes an error. Confused, James asks what it means, and Carlton reveals that the only reason the device is unable to measure Jae-hwan's spiritual corruption is that his spirit is purer than anyone else in chaos. Therefore, Carlton states that Jae-hwan's identity does not matter because they only need someone who can use the Spectre crystals. He reveals that the people inside the castle will now deliver a judgment on him. Hearing that, James asks if it is related to the Castellan's condition, but the captain states that he does not know the exact details either. After that, he turns his back to James and mentions hearing of someone receiving a bribe to let people enter, asking if it is correct, causing James to become anxious. Meanwhile, Jae-hwan and Mino walk on the streets of the village inside the fortress. While walking, Jae-hwan remarks that the paths are very complicated, while Mino follows him in a state of unconsciousness. Looking at her, Jae-hwan remembers that she was punished by the captain for bribing the guards, which caused her consciousness to become numb for some time. While walking up the bridge, Jae-hwan approaches a person and states that he is looking for a blacksmith specializing in swords, gaining the attention of the person standing under the bridge. Taking out his spirit sword, Jae-hwan asks if there is a blacksmith that can handle a sword of this level, but the person states that he is not sure. While the one standing under the bridge smiles, after some time, Mino regains her consciousness and becomes surprised, asking when they entered the village. Without turning to her, Jae-hwan remarks that she is finally coming to her senses and states that she can go on her own. Surprising her, as he begins to walk away, Mino starts running after him, asking if he is angry because she tried to leave him at the entrance of the fortress and apologizing for that. In response, Jae-hwan states that she guided him to the castle, which is enough, and she will only get in his way from then on. Turning to her, Jae-hwan states that they are very different and repeats that she should go her own way from then on. After standing still for a while, she grits her teeth and starts to run after him again, stating that he does not know his way around the place at all. In response, Jae-hwan states that he can simply ask people for directions, but she insists that he should ask her instead, revealing that she knows this place well. Hearing that, Jae-hwan remarks that he is going to find a nightmare, which confuses her. After a short pause, Mino states that she knows where it might be and asks if he wants her to guide him, and he agrees. Suddenly, he puts his hand in the backpack, stating that there seem to be some people who have business with him, and he turns to the people standing in his way. Looking at them, the person who saw him on the bridge gives a cruel smile, while his fellows ask if they are the people who have a good sword. Looking at them, Mino threatens them to go away if they do not want to get hurt, causing them to remark that she talks too much. Hearing that, one of them gets overwhelmed in anger, while the others state that this brother of theirs gets very angry when he hears such words. After that, they threaten them to hand over the spirit sword if they want to save themselves. In response, Jae-hwan simply states that he does not want to hand it over. Shocked by his calm demeanor, the thugs ask if they are not aware of the type of situation they are in and tell him to simply hand over the sword if he wants to live. Just then, the gigantic person accompanying them runs forward to attack Mino for declining to give him the sword. However, as he is about to attack, Jae-hwan intervenes, cuts both arms of the person, and pushes him with such force that he crashes into the wall, leaving all his fellows shocked as the muscular person lies on the ground. Jae-hwan walks towards them, remarking that they are very annoying, and takes out his sword, stating that if they want to fight, they can come to him. Feeling enraged, the rest of the thugs rush towards him, asking how he dared to harm their youngest brother. Holding their weapons, they state that they will show him the bond between brothers while Jae-hwan points his spirit sword at them, causing them to clash with each other. After some time, Jae-hwan holds his spirit sword with the transparent blood of the enemies dripping down from it, calling his skill amazing. Mino asks how he can finish everything with just a stab, and he reveals that this is the only thing he knows, shocking her. Mino reveals that someone she knows also uses a single technique like him, but his technique is a cut, not a stab. Remembering that he missed one of the earlier attacks during the fight, Mino asks if he slipped up while adjusting his strength. In response, Jae-hwan reveals that when they were fighting against the thugs, there was someone using the stealth technique on the roof, which bothered him, so he decided to scare them a little. Shocked, Mino asks who scares people by blowing up roofs and suggests that he name his technique, an idea that he does not like at all. Afterwards, they start to walk towards the market and soon reach a place called Twilight Dusk. Mino tells Jae-hwan that it is a smith founded by a nightmare and it is also the biggest smith in Gorgon. Just then, someone comes to them and asks if they have come to make a request. The person is Naven, the craftsman of Twilight Dusk, who tells them that it will take a while to fulfill their request if they put it in that day. Hearing that, Mino asks why the observations are full, and he replies that the workshop manager is absent at the moment and there is only the assistant manager in the shop who is also busy. He states that if they are looking for something, it might be better for them to buy a ready-made product rather than ordering something new. Meanwhile, a person standing inside the shop points to the sword placed on a table. He reveals that it is a sword made from the horn of a four-horned beast, which will be completed after one last step. Hearing that, the craftsman sitting in front of him, who appears to be his student, requests that he allow them to do it. In response, the person, who turns out to be Michael Garner, the assistant workshop manager, asks if they can make a hole in such a tough thing. Holding the sword in his hand, Michael states that if anyone succeeds in making a hole in this tough sword, he will be made the assistant manager of Twilight Dusk for one day. Hearing that, all of his students start to try and make a hole but find it very tough and difficult to pierce through. Looking at their weak moves, Michael states that they cannot even create a dent on the sword with the amount of energy they are exercising and shares his disappointment with them. Looking at them from a distance, Nathan remarks that he wonders when he will get a chance to touch a four-horned beast's horn. While he is saying that, he notices that Jae-hwan has already entered the workshop and tries to stop him, but he does not. Hearing his voice, Michael turns around, facing Jae-hwan, while Jae-hwan states that he wants to give it a try, making Michael think that he is a traveling craftsman. Michael states that it will not be easy for him to do since all of his students have been unsuccessful in doing it. While Jae-hwan asks where to make a hole, Michael keeps bragging about his own expertise and skills. Meanwhile, Jae-hwan uses his finger to pierce through the sword, leaving Michael in a state of utter astonishment. Swinging the sword on his finger, Jae-hwan states that since he did it, he will be the assistant manager of the workshop for one day. Just then, cracks start to form on the precious sword, followed by it breaking into pieces, which leaves them all shocked and enraged. Overwhelmed with anger, Michael states that it was a very expensive horn that he destroyed in an instant, but Jaehwan states that he went easy on it. Jaehwan states that breaking it completely is easy, but only lightly breaking something is difficult, and he apologizes for what he did. However, deeply angered due to his loss, Michael states that an apology cannot make up for the loss he did. Grabbing Jaehwan from his clothes, Michael asks what they will tell the Primordial Universe faction that commissioned the weapon to them. Jaehwan states that he will repay them with a better horn, causing Michael to remark that a beggar like him can never repay them with a horn better than the horn of a four-horned beast. Hearing that, Jaehwan puts his hand in the backpack and takes out the horn of a five-horned beast, giving it to them, which leaves everyone shocked. Looking at the horn with amazement, Michael states that he can definitely consider it as payment for destroying the four-horned sword, addressing him as dear customer. Considering it to be a relief, Jaehwan asks if he can use their smith for a little time, to which Michael tells his students to close the doors of the workshop. Complying, the students go and close the door, while Michael starts moving inside, telling Jaehwan to follow him. Meanwhile, Mina leaves the workshop, stating that there is a place that she needs to visit. After she leaves, the workshop is closed, and Michael takes Jaehwan inside. He informs him that as the assistant manager of the workshop for that day, Jaehwan can make use of all the facilities and people there as much as he likes. After that, Michael asks how Jaehwan managed to obtain the horn of a five-horned beast, and Jaehwan replies that he got it by himself. Surprised to hear that, Michael asks if he hunted a five-horned beast by himself, and Jaehwan agrees. In response, Michael becomes amazed, thinking that such strong people are very rare in the entirety of Chaos. Jaehwan turns around, asking him to assist him in making a scabbard. Hearing that, Michael becomes surprised, asking if he is going to use this horn to make a scabbard. In response, Jaehwan takes out the spirit sword, asking how great this sword might be in his view. Looking at the sword, Michael states that it is a replica of an ice dragon sword and remarks that it is rare since it was made by a nightmare, though it does not look very pretty. However, he thinks that this horn will be too much for a weapon like that, and he should better make a new sword with it instead. However, just then he starts to sense a spiritual energy from the sword and realizes that it is a spirit weapon containing the soul of an elite race. He wonders how it happened. Looking at the sword, Michael remarks that its evolution seems to be a great one, and when this evolution is complete, he will have to give it a new name since it will lose its original name. However, Michael considers making a weapon difficult since Jaehwan has already destroyed the horn. But Jaehwan informs him that he has another one as well. Shocked, Michael stares at him while Jaehwan takes out another horn from the backpack and gives it to him. After gazing at the horn for a while, Michael realizes that it was from a five-horned beast, so it must have five horns, which is quite an obvious thing. Turning to Jaehwan, he asks how he can assist him, and Jaehwan wants him to show how he refines things. Agreeing, Michael asks if there is a particular shape that he wants, but Jaehwan states that he will leave that to him. Hearing that, Michael becomes excited, stating that he will show him his own skills as the master craftsman in the Gorgon Castle. The commander sits in his office, enjoying tea. Meanwhile, his secret agent informs him about an event involving thugs being killed by someone named Jaehwan and mentions that they lost their target during the operation. In response, the castle commander, Yurin Cheever, asks for details on how the thugs were killed, but the agent admits that he's uncertain about that as well. He explains that he suddenly lost consciousness while on the roof, leaving the commander to inquire if he was captured. Considering that the murderer perceived through the stealth skills of a master-level 3rd stage adapter, the commander deduces that the perpetrator must be at least a 5th stage adapter. Consequently, he orders his agent to increase the force and thoroughly search every corner of the castle to locate this individual, and the agent complies. After the agent leaves the room, the commander winces and lets out a sigh. In a sudden realization, he opens his eyes and notices his teacup shaking violently. He pounds the table, remembering his castellan, and tells him to endure a little longer. Meanwhile, in a bar, a lot of people sit watching a show in which the host plays the video of the most debated topic of that time, the 99th floor solo clear. As they watch, the individuals discussed potential scenarios regarding what might have transpired with the person involved. Just then, one of them reveals that the tower got suspended and shares his belief that some demon might have gotten caught, causing the suspension. The group talks about the rumor that the demon ran away and abandoned their cultivation duty, expressing their astonishment at someone's ability to clear a first-generation tower alone. As they discuss amongst themselves, the door swings open, and Mino enters. The sight of such a beautiful woman surprises everyone present, but she pays them no mind and heads straight to the counter, taking a seat. At that moment, a person approaches her with the intention of inquiring about something. However, she swiftly turns around and rudely tells him to leave. This causes the individual to feel embarrassed, prompting him to silently retreat. Sitting there, she feels increasingly frustrated, which leads her to order a considerable quantity of drakes. After consuming numerous drinks, she loses control of her senses and begins to vent her frustration about Jae-hwan in front of Claire, the pub owner, who herself starts to feel exasperated. Taking into account Mino's irritation with Jae-hwan, Claire asks why she doesn't simply distance herself from him. Mino responds, explaining that he has been a source of great frustration due to his tendency to destroy everything during his fights. She goes on to mention that his fighting style demonstrates a disregard for the established rules of their surroundings, coupled with his penchant for uttering peculiar statements. Mino recalls an instance during one of his fights when she remarked on his lack of hesitation in employing his strength, despite not comprehending the nature of chaos. Jae-hwan's response was a simple assertion that those who hesitate are not truly human. These comments, along with his declaration that he and Mino are fundamentally different, intensify her frustration and make her feel insignificant. She conveys that while everyone in chaos has endured hardships, Jae-hwan inexplicably emerges and looks down upon her, asserting that she can never grasp his motivations. As she continues to vent her frustration, Claire places a comforting hand on her shoulder, remarking on her immaturity and advising her to never get mixed up in all that ever again. Claire firmly forbids Mino from approaching Jae-hwan again, emphasizing that doing so would result in her own death. Upon hearing this, Mino becomes perplexed and questions why Claire is speaking in such a manner and what her intentions are. Just as she ponders this, the pub's doors swing open, ushering in a radiant stream of shimmering particles that envelop Mino. All of a sudden, a parrot materializes before her and delivers a piece of paper to her. The paper happens to be a letter from Carlton, the chief of the northern checkpoint. Puzzled by the unexpected correspondence, Mino begins to open the letter, her anticipation clouded by a sense of unease. In the midst of this, a voice emanates from behind her, inquiring if she is the infamous Witch of Massacre. Startled by the question, Mino instinctively reaches for her dagger, acknowledging that some do indeed refer to her by that name. She turns around only to have her arm seized tightly by the newcomer. The forceful grip causes her to drop her dagger. Expressing his lack of interest in engaging in a fight with her due to his busy schedule, the individual discloses that he requires her assistance for a task. Meanwhile, within the confines of a workshop, a massive five-horned beast materializes, leaving Michael in a state of shock and fear. Overwhelmed by fear, Michael contemplates how he could possibly refine such a monstrous entity. Suddenly, Jae-hwan emerges from behind, forcefully pulling Michael back and reminding him of their ongoing smelting process. Despite the chaotic presence of the rampaging monster nearby, Jae-hwan dismisses it and asserts that Michael had previously agreed to aid him, urging him to fulfill his commitment. Appropriately, having launched countless hammer strikes upon the horn, Michael finds himself exhausted and comments that the refinement task is far beyond his current capabilities. Jae-hwan counters this notion, asserting that the issue lies not in levels but in perception. He proceeds to place his hand over Michael's eyes briefly and then withdraws it, emphasizing the importance of seeing. Perplexed by the experience, Michael gazes at the horn, which begins to melt right before his eyes, eventually floating in the air. This causes him to cover his eyes in shock. In an unexpected turn, the melted horn undergoes a transformation, manifesting into a colossal five-horned beast, which leaves Michael utterly astounded as the beast unleashes havoc. Michael remains in a state of disbelief, pondering if this creature truly embodies the essence of the five-horned beast. He reflects on his previous casual approach to refining, realizing the gravity of his actions toward such a formidable being. Struggling to comprehend the situation, Michael questions if he is trapped in a dream and seeks to awaken by approaching the nearby door. Running towards it, he asserts the dreamlike nature of his surroundings while Jae-hwan observes with a sigh. Upon rushing outside, Mekl desperately calls for assistance, only to be met with a shocking sight: his students and workshop laborers have transformed into airy skeletons. Overwhelmed by fear and disbelief, Michael trembles as his students inquire if he has already completed the refinement process. This prompts him to enter a trance-like state, leaving his students puzzled. Amidst this turmoil, a voice informs Michael that he lacks the privilege to behold this realm. These occurrences lead him to question the existence of such a surreal world. Meanwhile, Jae-hwan is engrossed in hunting the monster and forging weapons from its horns, contemplating his presence in this unfamiliar domain. Despite the challenges, he remains unfazed, continuing his work by extracting body parts from the living monster and diligently striking it with his forging hammer. While doing that, he wonders why he was specifically chosen to be sent to this world. Outside the room, Michael gradually emerges from his trance, letting out a piercing scream. After some time, looking at Jae-hwan, who has broken the horn, Michael remarks that a normal human's attempt to acquire power equal to a nightmare or surpass natural limits is ultimately futile. Commenting that he appears to have aged too much to handle the horn effectively, Michael suggests that Jae-hwan should have recognized this fact. Dropping his gaze, Michael explains that Jae-hwan originally visited the workshop to see the manager, who was a nightmare. However, it has been quite some time since the manager left, leaving behind a mere human like Michael. In response, Jae-hwan dismisses the importance of his race, asserting that as long as Michael can craft a scabbard, it's all good. At encouraging Michael to persist, despite Jae-hwan's encouragement, Michael asserts that he has already made numerous attempts. However, Jae-hwan argues that success can be achieved even after trying 100 million times, eliciting a chuckle from Michael. Michael states that although he does not seem like working hard to him, in reality, he has worked really hard. This triggers a memory for Jae-hwan of his friend Jae, who used to claim he was working diligently while watching Jae-hwan. Recalling Jae's assertion of mastering all the skills related to blacksmithing, Jae-hwan remembers Jae's confidence in being able to repair any weapon from the tower with a 99% success rate. However, he stated that after achieving that success rate, he came to have the odd thought that he was not running towards the 99% chance of success but away from the 1% chance of failure. Drawing on this memory, Jae-hwan turns to Michael and acknowledges the tremendous effort Michael has put in, asking if he understands the principle behind the processing skill. Michael responds that the principle of the nightmare's processing skill is one of the original skills that have existed since the beginning. He analogizes it by asking how a human can explain the origin of the world. Upon hearing Michael's words, Jae-hwan notes that Michael has been utilizing a skill without truly comprehending its essence. After a brief silence, Michael posits that the principle might involve infusing tools with spiritual power and meticulously refining the horn using that power. However, he questions why other craftsmen cannot grasp this straightforward principle. Jae-hwan explains that these craftsmen haven't properly learned how to utilize the skill. Hearing that, Michael thinks that if the principle behind this skill is so simple, his students must be able to at least copy it or do something similar. Turning to Jae-hwan, Michael asks if he knows the principle behind processing. In response, Jae-hwan states that he did not know about it but figured it out, and he brings his finger near the horn. By the impact of his touch, the horn starts to melt itself, making them astonished. He instructs them to look closely and tell him what they see, causing all the craftsmen to get near him, watching closely. They reveal that they can see particles breaking down and remark that it must be very difficult. In response, Jae-hwan asserts that their extraordinary efforts have inadvertently solidified the constraints of the world, limiting their perspectives. He emphasizes that they should recognize that if their intensive labor hasn't led to success, it's not their fault but rather an indication of the limitations of the world itself. Michael is shocked by this revelation and recalls how the nightmare he worked with always discouraged him from learning such methods. The nightmare always used to assert that these skills belonged exclusively to nightmares and not to humans. The nightmare's discouragement revolved around human limitations, labeling Michael's potential as no more than an apprentice level. Michael, however, resisted these constraints and believed he could transcend them through hard work. Remembering that, Michael asks what he is supposed to do, inquiring if Jae-hwan wants him to fight against the world. In response, Jae-hwan states that the world tricks individuals into believing they can achieve what they truly can and states that Michael might be old but still possesses the capacity to fight. After that, he turns to the horn again, telling them to take another close look while advising them not to rely on the system and instead use their own eyes. Complying, Michael looks closely and finds Jae-hwan running towards the same beast again. This makes him realize that Jae-hwan has always looked at a world without skills or interfaces, an honest world where there is no deception. This makes him wonder how someone can live like that unless they are insane, and he raises his hammer in the air, launching a forceful strike at the horn. Sometime later, Jae-hwan emerges from the workshop, stating that his work is complete and he must depart. Michael gazes at his transformed sword and inquires whether Jae-hwan has chosen a name for it. In response, Jae-hwan reveals that he is not, prompting Michael to request the privilege. Jae-hwan grants it, and Michael names the sword Maverick, stating that there can be no better name for this sword. After that, all the craftsmen bid farewell to Jae-hwan and wish him a safe journey, feeling sad at his departure. As he begins to walk away, Michael calls out to him once more and asks how he looks in the world Jae-hwan sees. In response, Jae-hwan simply utters the word human before departing without a backward glance, leaving Michael to ponder if anyone else can truly comprehend that solitary world. As he walks away from the castle, Mino starts to quietly follow him. Sensing her presence, Jae-hwan asks why she is following him, prompting her to ask if he thinks her intentions are dark. Turning to her, Jae-hwan asks if she is planning something again, curious about how he is aware of her plans. Mino admits that she intends to kill him. In response, Jae-hwan questions the purpose behind her desire to kill him. Mino asserts that she aims to acquire a life of luxury and utilize the soul stone he possesses, eliciting a smile from him. Observing his lack of genuine emotion, she gives Jae-hwan some clothes, telling him that she does not want to use his things for free and also wants to apologize. After that, she remarks that he could not meet the nightmare and asks what he is going to do. In response, he reveals that Michael told him how to meet them, and he intends to follow and ask about the tree of imagery to find the way to the deaf. Hearing that, she asks what his purpose is behind going there and reaching into the depths. She goes on to explain what happens to the people who return from the depths. When Jae-hwan reveals that he is not going to return, feeling shocked at his intention, she becomes frustrated and asks who gave him the right to do everything without caring about the opinions of others. She remarks that he always does everything in his own way and calls him cold and inconsiderate. Looking around at the people on the streets, she remarks that she does not understand why Jae-hwan does not consider them humans. She states that she and all the other people there are also humans but are not as strong and brave as him. Looking at her, Jae-hwan remembers how she was willing to die in the present and never return to the past. He also remembers Michael, who was resolute in his determination to become like nightmares and worked really hard for that. Using his ability to read her thoughts, Jae-hwan realizes that she has given a task to lure him and is threatened by keeping someone dear to her as a hostage. Wondering if it is him that they want, Jae-hwan looks around, finding people hiding on the opposite sides of the street. He thinks that in order to save the hostage, he has to risk his life. However, he considers it to be meaningless, thinking that no matter how many times he saves them, the truth does not change. He thinks that this is the world that is dominated by figures of wealth and information, and by people who have sold their souls for the sake of money. Therefore, he thinks it would be better to get rid of them and find the nightmare. Just then, Mino steps forward and snatches the bag of clothes from him, stating that he is the one who does not seem to be a human. She says that it is better for them to part ways, remarking that she cannot work together with that kind of purpose, making him confused. She states that they will never meet again and she starts to walk away, making Jae-hwan realize that she indeed looks like a human. While the people who are observing them send a message that Mino has betrayed them and that the nightmare has gone to waste, Jae-hwan wonders if the nightmare is with them. After a while, Mino reaches the pub again and opens the door, calling out to her Aunt Claire. However, upon entering, she is met with a scene of destruction. The interior of the pub lies in ruins, and a group of individuals wielding weapons stands menacingly, holding Claire captive. Looking at Mino, Claire states that she might really die this time because of her. Just then, Janaya, the person standing in front of her, asks why she is alone and what happened to their deal, remarking that he is more naive than he looks. Mino asks if he has ever seen a witch keeper's promises and takes out her daggers, stating that the person they want cannot reach this place. With a swift motion, she hurls her daggers in their direction, revealing that the person thereafter has ventured to eliminate another target. Janaya, undeterred by her assault, remarks on her seemingly unstable state of mind and employs his shadow occult skill, conjuring potent shadows to engage Mino in combat. Recognizing her capability to confront multiple opponents simultaneously, Janaya anticipates witnessing her prowess firsthand. However, before the shadows can launch their attack, Mino executes a backflip, flinging more daggers in their direction. In response to her counterattack, Janaya grips his sword tightly and drives it into the floor, unleashing a massive wave that hurtles toward Mino, knocking her to the ground. Reaching near her, Janaya states that no one will be able to know what is happening inside such a place and gives her another chance to go and bring Jaehwan to them. In response, she states that they will be chased by the dark forest, while they tell her to stop bluffing, stating that there are no branches of the dark forest in the fortress of Gorgon. Placing the sickle on Claire's neck, he states that they will not be able to find out until she and her aunt get completely destroyed. Clenching her fists, Mino gets on her feet again and launches a formidable dagger attack using her skill of frozen fencing. However, with a single swing of the sword, Janaya shatters all of Mino's daggers into pieces, his laughter filled with malice as he proclaims his intention to personally tear her apart. Considering that there is no chance for her to win against such a powerful person. She remembers Jaehwan asking her if she will return to the past if she gets a chance. Smiling, she thinks that she really wants to get back to the past at such a time while Janaya raises his sword in the air to kill her. However, as soon as he brings the sword down towards her, a powerful blow strikes him, making his comrades feel surprised. Just then, Jaehwan enters the pub, stating that he really hates this kind of deployment, causing Mino to ask why he came here, expecting that he would come to save her. However, to her disappointment, he states that he came because the clothes did not fit him and gives her the packet back. Looking at Jaehwan, Janaya and his people smile, asking if he is the one who possesses a spirit weapon, thinking that he has made it easier for them by coming there himself. In response, Jaehwan asks if they are the people who have the nightmare and tells them to bring the nightmare to that place. At that moment, looking at Jaehwan, Janaya and his group feel surprised, remarking that he is as crazy as the rumors about him say. Just then, Mino calls out to him, telling him to be careful and revealing that Janaya is a fourth stage adapter. Just then, Janaya and his group charge at him, stating that they will teach him a lesson. In response, Jaehwan takes out his sword and directs a strong energy wave towards them, leaving them confused. Realizing that Janaya has dodged the attack, Jaehwan feels surprised. Meanwhile, the members of the opposite group are equally surprised and wonder if he is one of the mighty of the abyss. Jaehwan contemplates how Janaya dodged it, thinking that the only creature able to dodge his slight thrust is the five-horned beast and wonders if a fourth stage adapter is equal in power to that. However, thinking that it does not matter, Jaehwan prepares to launch an attack. Yet before he can launch the attack, Janaya brings Claire forward with the intention of using her as a shield and states that if he launches the attack, she will not be safe either. However, Claire still encourages him to attack without worrying about her, which causes Janaya to slap her, telling her to be quiet if she doesn't want to get beaten up. Seeing that, Mino tells her to hang in there, stating that they will save her. And then turns to Jaehwan, asking if he can do it. Holding his sword, Jaehwan wonders why she is asking him that while he came here for the nightmare and not to save them. He thinks that he needs to kill anyone in his way, whether it is the enemy or the hostage. But Mino stops him, stating that she is a human, remembering the people in the market and Mino herself. Jaehwan stops in his tracks while those standing in front of him mock him, telling him to launch an attack if he can. Looking at them with his special insight, Jaehwan finds them all to resemble skeletons except for Claire, who resembles a complete human and tells Jaehwan to launch an attack. After contemplating for a moment, Jaehwan raises his sword upwards and unleashes a powerful wave of energy from it that breaks the roof of the pub and touches the sky. Standing outside, Carlton's guards and the other people feel surprised, wondering what it is. After observing the wave for a while, Carlton realizes what might have happened and tells his guards to move. This wave of energy breaks the soundproof barrier above the pub, which makes Janaya and his people anxious. Shortly after, Carlton enters the pub, telling the guards to surround the place and comes to Jaehwan, asking what is happening, remarking that he has come at the right time. Jaehwan states that the people fighting them are breaking the laws that Carlton loves so much, pointing towards Janaya. Jaehwan states that he does not know much about the details, but this person has broken the Gorgon criminal law. He discloses Janaya's intent to exploit the bar as a base and collaborate with the Nightmare to orchestrate world destruction, prompting Mino to ask if he is not the one who intends to do that. In response, Carlton cites the Gorgon criminal law, asserting that all those involved in the destruction of property and the abduction of residents will be subject to arrest without a warrant. Upon hearing Carlton's announcement, Janaya addresses his comrades, deciding it's time to retreat. In response, Carlton deploys his silver restraints and asks if it is that easy for them to get away, saying that he ties them all up with his chains and summons a large axe, stating that any further resistance is futile. Just then, Janaya charges at him with his sword, which Carlton blocks using his axe. Despite exerting a lot of force, Janaya is unable to break through the axe and keeps making efforts until his own sword starts to crack. Seeing that, he leaps up in the air to launch an attack, but before he can do that, Carlton uses his silver restraints to tie up his hand and pulls him down, leading him to crash to the ground. Lying down, having lost all his energy, Janaya finally surrenders, and Carlton remarks that it was a wise decision and starts tying up both of his hands, stating that he is his name as he is righteous. Janaya throws a ball in his direction, making him confused. As soon as the ball falls to the ground, it starts to emit poisonous fumes that spread throughout the pub. Looking at the fumes coming out of the pub, he states that they did not think they would need to use a black cloud in this place. Just then, one of his group members, dragging an unconscious member of their group, states that he inhaled the black cloud because he was not wearing his mask properly. Just then, Janaya hears a voice remarking that they used the black cloud without the clan leader's permission and turns behind to see Sailrang, the clan elder, who asks if Mino is that strong. In response, Janaya reveals that they did not do it because of Mino but because the silver restraint was used, making him surprised. Looking at the destroyed pub, he asks if Carlton is in there, and they agree, prompting him to laugh, stating that he must have inhaled the black cloud, which will make his condition worse. Just then, he notices Jaehwan coming out of the pub, holding Mino, looking completely fine, and turns to Janaya, asking who he is, looking at Sailrang sitting on the tree branch. Jaehwan directed the energy of his sword towards the tree, causing it to be destroyed. This surprised them, causing them to wonder how he came out of the pub without getting affected by the black cloud. Just then, one of them remarks that he has never seen an emerald bug without antennas, and even if he is an emerald bug, there is no way he can do such a thing. After leaving Mino at a safe location, Jaehwan turns to them, wondering if they are the cleanup party, and holds his sword tightly, remarking that they are very annoying. Raising his sword up in the air, Jaehwan strikes it on the ground with all his might, while thinking that he did not want to use the skill initially. Just then, a formidable five-horned Garnak emerges from the sword, and powerful waves of energy are sent in the direction of the enemies. Feeling shocked and scared at such overwhelming power, they start to run in different directions to save themselves. However, their escape proves futile since the energy waves strike them at a rapid speed, tearing their bodies apart and causing them all to die in an instant. Making his way forward, walking through the dead bodies, Jaehwan reaches Janaya and Sailrang, both sitting on the ground. Wondering what type of monster he is, Sailrang gets up and starts to run away, telling the rest of his group members to deal with Jaehwan. Sitting alone and looking at the dead bodies of his brothers, Janaya feels frustrated at things ending up like this, stating that there is no way he can get out of there alive. Jaehwan steps near him, ordering him to tell them where they have hidden the nightmare. In response, Janaya states that there is no point in surviving here because when he finds out, they will be wishing that they had died sooner, making Jaehwan confused about what he refers to, stating that his fate is to die one way or another. Janaya takes out a specter crystal and consumes it, feeling surprised. Jaehwan remembers when he discussed it with Mino, she stated that everyone in chaos seems to be taking a narcotic, and she revealed that it is not a narcotic but a medicine to decrease their spiritual corruption. She told him that if they do not decrease their spiritual corruption in these ways, they will end up as the ghoul that no one wants to become. As a result of consuming the specter crystal, Janaya's body undergoes a transformation, turning him into a gigantic fearsome creature with large teeth, countless tongues, and a formidable body with a fierce intent in his eyes. He starts to kill everyone that comes in his way and wreaks havoc, creating a wave of fear and disturbance in the entire village. After undergoing the transformation, Janaya stands, wondering what use any dignity is in the world and why he was so afraid when he could be that free. With fierce intent in his eyes, he turns to Jae-hwan, thinking that he will be able to kill him with this power. However, to his surprise, Jae-hwan stood confidently in front of him, holding his sword, and stated that it was not possible for a human to exist in a world like this. Looking at Janaya, he wonders what type of person he is, thinking that even when he uses his skill of suspicion, he is unable to see his true essence. However, stating that it does not matter, Jae-hwan raises his sword and channels its energy towards Janaya, inflicting excruciating torment on him. The impact of the powerful energy wave shatters Janaya's body, sending its fragments scattering and initiating an abrupt rainstorm. Amidst the agony, Janaya recalls his childhood memories of playing in the rain, reflecting on the present rainfall as his body disintegrates into countless pieces, marking his demise. Gazing at Janaya's lifeless body, Jae-hwan contemplates the nature of his character. After some time, he starts to walk ahead, hoping that one of the stragglers might know the location of the nightmare, and leaves the place. After leaving the place, Jae-hwan comes back to the pub where he finds Mino lying in a state of unconsciousness. Meanwhile, Carlton, who is lying on the ground, states that they need to alert the inner fortress immediately. As he goes near Mino, he finds her body slowly turning black, and she requests that he kill her before she can transform into a monster. This makes Jae-hwan finally realize that Mino is indeed a human, and he remembers that he was unable to use comprehend on her. However, he still goes on to pull out his sword, thinking that there is no need for emotions at the place he is heading. Yet, before he can kill her, Claire grabs his arm, telling him to stop. Coming near them, she states that it might not be too late yet, while the guards try to hold her back, stating that she needs to get to the medical facility. However, ignoring her own injuries, she keeps requesting that Jae-hwan not kill Mino and wait for some time. After some time in the medical camps, the physicians look at Mino's condition, thinking that the only chance for her survival would be if her deadification stopped progressing. Meanwhile, Jae-hwan stands at a distance from them, waiting for their feedback on her condition. Just then, an emergency notice is issued, informing them of an invasion of small dead creatures in the fortress. This causes a wave of fear and confusion to spread among people, and they start running here and there to save themselves, while the authorities tell them to evacuate the place quickly. In the midst of this situation, a child comes to one of the guards and asks where they need to evacuate. In response, the person looks at him and turns out to be the same deadly monster they are running away from. Shocked, the child gazes at it while the monster pierces its countless tentacles through his body, and more such creatures start to emerge. Suddenly, a group of powerful warriors leaps down from the rooftops, wielding weapons and engaging the monsters in a relentless battle. As they successfully annihilate all the monsters, Jae-hwan looks at the person leading them and wonders if he is the one that Mina was talking about. Just then, Claire turns to him and remarks that he said he would reject all the rules of this place, judge the world with his own standards, and give his own definition of a human. She states that she knows people like him very well and has already seen one before. Placing her hand on Mino's forehead, she states that people who live and adapt to this place are not fools, instead, they are doing it because they do not have any other choice. In response, Jae-hwan shares his belief that they lack courage in that choice. Confused, Claire asks what type of courage they have. Jae-hwan replies that it is the courage to go beyond the limitations and find a definition that is more correct. Hearing that, Claire remarks that he is probably someone who goes after something like that, and he might be correct. But because she does not have courage, she cannot understand it. Looking at him, she states that she does know one thing, and that is that he is very dangerous. She states that he needs to leave because people find hope by looking at him, and if he stays, they will fall into great despair, making him remember the deaths of his comrades in the tower. In contrast to Claire, Jae-hwan remembers Mino requesting that he never gives up on this world and stay there, which makes him contemplate what to do. Meanwhile, standing by the bed where Carlton lies, experiencing the same condition, James tells the physician to use all the medicine they have to treat him, and they comply while Jae-hwan observes them. The physician takes a horned beast's horn and starts to grind it with a mortar and pestle. After making a paste, they start to feed it to Carlton, but it does not have any impact on him, which makes them more worried. Walking near James, Jae-hwan asks if there will be no chance for him to revert back to a human when he becomes dead. Feeling frustrated, James replies that if he knew about it, he would not have been this anxious. Hearing that, Jae-hwan grabs Carlton from his clothes and starts to shake him, telling him to wake up and stating that he has a question for him, which leaves James shocked and angry. However, to their surprise, Carlton soon opens his eyes and turns to Jae-hwan, requesting that he kill him and stating that he is the only person who can do it. Confused, Jae-hwan asks if he would not be asking him to save him in such a situation. In response, Carlton refers to the law of Gorgon and states that all the souls that start to become corrupt must be destroyed immediately. Hearing that, Jae-hwan becomes surprised at his loyalty and thinks that if there were a few more people like him, he would not have been trapped in the tower for 40 years. Soon after, they start getting an alert that the soul corruption of Carlton has reached up to 94% and his deification is about to begin. Just then, the person who killed the dead monsters a while ago enters the camp and turns out to be the anti-dead extermination squad captain, Jaehae. Looking at him, James feels surprised, while Jaehae takes out his sword and states that, in accordance with the laws of Gorgon, he will kill Carlton and another individual. Announcing that he has come here to kill Carlton and another individual, Jaehae raises his sword in the air. However, before he can act upon it, Jae-hwan intervenes and grabs his sword, stating that he will not let him kill Carlton because he has a few questions for him. Feeling surprised at Jae-hwan blocking his attack with bare hands, Jaehae turns to him and says that he is not aware of his identity. However, looking at Carlton, he explains that if a stage 5 adapter like him becomes dead, a terrifying disaster would occur, which they want to prevent. Asking if he is really going to become dead, Jae-hwan takes out a 5-horned beast's horn, stating that this can help him, leaving all of them shocked. Looking at that, the physician replies that such a horn can definitely bring him back to a normal state, so he crushes the horn barehandedly, intensifying their shock. After he crushes the horn, it is fed to both Carlton and Mino, which leads to an increasing number of Carlton's spiritual corruption to stop, making them all feel relieved. However, in contrast to that, the horn causes the deification process to accelerate in Mino because of her declining stamina. Soon after, they get a warning that her soul corruption has reached up to 95% and her deification is about to begin, making them realize that they cannot stop it from happening. Considering that, Jaehae steps towards her and takes out his sword, while Claire requests that they call Chunjio, stating that he can do the dead slash. Hearing that, Jae-hwan feels confused, while Claire explains that the dead slash simply cuts away only the corruption. However, Jaehae states that Chunjio is attending to an important matter within the fortress and cannot be called for something as trivial as this. Dragging her away, reaching Mino, he turns to Jae-hwan standing in his way and states that he will not compromise on this one, telling him to step aside. After a small pause, Jae-hwan grabs his sword and states that he will be the one to kill her because she requested that he do that, while Jaehae remains silent. In response, Jae-hwan takes out his sword and fixes it above Mino, activating his skill of questioning. Seeing that he is about to kill her, Claire starts shouting, telling him not to do that. Meanwhile, Jae-hwan keeps standing still, placing his sword on Mino's heart. Bright shiny particles start to appear suddenly, and a bright light starts to surround him, which transports him into an empty space, making him wonder what it is. Just then, he notices an old man sitting beside Mino, asking how she landed herself in such a state and gently touches her face, stating that he will help her. Just then, the old man looks up and finds Jae-hwan standing near them and becomes shocked, asking who he is and how he entered his world. Looking at his sword, the old man remarks that such a noble soul cannot possess such a narrow mind. Meanwhile, Jae-hwan tries to use his skill of questioning on him but is unable to do that and begins to speculate if this elderly figure is the source of Mino's soul corruption, believing that eliminating the old man might save Mino. Now, Jae-hwan charges towards him, and the old man counters with his own sword, and a clash ensues as both manage to block each other's powerful attacks. Seeing that, both of them feel surprised at each other's ability to block their strong attacks. Suddenly, the old man's sword starts to crack, leading to the collapse of his realm. This makes him visible to all the other people present in the camp, surprising them. Feeling enraged, the old man turns to Jae-hwan and asks how he dared to destroy his world and who he is, tightening his grip on his cracked sword. This causes his sword to break down into countless pieces, making the old man both sad and angry, considering that his weapon was made of a trihorn's horn. Turning to Jae-hwan, the old man starts to vent his frustration. However, Jaehwan keeps standing quietly, thinking that it wasn't him but the old man who broke the sword. This elderly person turns out to be Chunjio, the divine physician of the castle. Coming near him, Jaehae asks why he is here, and he replies that someone is about to die here, and it does not matter if he is the fortress master or not. Surprised, Jaehae and his subordinates stare at him. In the meantime, Chunjio turns to Jaehwan, stating that he has completely disrupted his dead slash, which was only possible with a sword made of trihorn or something better. Just then, he notices Jaehwan's pentahorn sword, feeling amazed, and starts to look at it from all directions, asking where he got such an incredible sword from and how he got such a rare sword. Chunjio is about to touch it when Jaehwan grabs his hand and asks if he will be able to save Mino if he lends him this sword, and Chunjio agrees. Hearing that, Jaehwan takes out the sword and gives it to him, making Chunjio think that he is very confident in his abilities, which has made him lend his sword to someone he just met. However, considering that it is not important at the moment, Chunjio holds it in both hands, remarking that it is just like its owner. While all the others in the camp look at him with curiosity, he turns to Mino, stating that they should see what this sword is capable of. Suddenly, the bright light begins to spread throughout the camp, causing Jaehwan to wonder if it's the same illusion from earlier. However, after a moment, he realizes that it resembles how he perceives things using his skill of suspicion. Observing the old man who has commenced the treatment, Jaehwan contemplates whether he also possesses the ability to perceive the world in a similar manner. After a while, the sword slips from the old man's grasp, followed by his own collapse, leaving Jaehwan perplexed. Gazing up, Chunjio reveals that he is lacking in spiritual energy due to the Castellan. Just then, the ground begins to tremble, signaling the imminent collapse of the world around them. Recognizing the failure of the treatment, Chunjio apologizes to Jaehwan, expressing his embarrassment. Hearing that, Jaehwan comes forward and takes his sword, looking at him, and remarks that it is foolish, stating that he has not even managed to integrate fully into his world but is still trying to copy the dead slash. In response, Jaehwan states that he cannot slash, but if it is just mimicry, he can try it and holds the sword tightly. Seeing that, Chunjio tells him to stop, stating that dead slashing is not something that anyone can do. Jaehwan remembers Claire's words, who remarked that his acts were not bravery but recklessness, and tells Chunjio to stay quiet. Fixing his sword onto the floor, he states that it is the first time in his life that he has picked up the sword to save someone. Hearing that, Chunjio feels shocked, while Jaehwan starts remembering Mino's appearance and drawing it on the floor. Remembering her face, personality, and expressions, Jaehwan makes a complete sketch of her on the floor and finally thinks that something seems to be missing. After thinking a little, he draws a mole under her eye, which completes her face. As soon as the sketch is complete, they are transported back to the real world, where Jaehwan finds Mino's condition to have improved very much. Realizing that her corruption level has started to drop and the process of deadification has stopped, Jaehae feels amazed. Looking at Jaehwan, Shanggyo remarks that he seems to be less narrow-minded at the moment and asks who he is. Remembering that he used something similar to a dead slash, Chunjio asks where he learned such a thing from. Hearing that, Jaehae turns to Chunjio, asking if Jaehwan really used something similar to a dead slash, and Chunjio agrees. He reveals that his dead slash is not a skill, which is why none of the adapters have ever managed to learn it. Therefore, all of them come to the realization that Jaehwan is not an adapter but an awakener, just like Chunjio. They know that awakeners are rare, unordinary people who obtain powerful strength by rejecting adaptation and possess the strength to completely change the power dynamic of chaos. Jaehae thinks that because Jaehwan is an awakener like Chunjio, he is able to use a dead slash. But Chunjio argues that they are still unaware of his true identity. Hearing that, Jaehae states that it was Chunghyo who told them that if there is another person who can use the dead slash, it can become possible for them to save the Castellan. While Chunjio stays silent in response, Jaehae argues that nothing is more important to them than saving the life of their Castellan. Just then, someone enters the camp, stating that he has permission from the inner castle and telling them to step aside. Turning to him, Jaehae recognizes him as the Dark Shadow Captain. Looking at them, they wonder what these people are doing there, thinking that they have nothing to do with the dead extermination. However, instead of talking to them, the captain walks straight to Jaehwan and kneels down in front of him to greet him, addressing him as the envoy of the Green Paris. Getting up, he requests Jaehwan to come with him to the inner castle and turns to Jaehae and Chunjio, asking what they are doing here, making them feel shocked. Looking at Jaehwan, they wonder if he is really the envoy of the Green Paris. After some time, they reach the inner castle with the Dark Shadow Captain, and Jaehae takes Jaehwan to a room to meet Yurin, remarking that they have finally met. Yurin goes ahead to introduce himself before coming to the main matter. He tells Jaehwan that his name is Yurinchiver and he is the commander of the castle. After that, he comes to the main topic and asks if Jaehwan is really the envoy of the Green Pyrrhus. In response, Jaehwan states that he is not, leaving the Dark Shadow Captain shocked, while Urun states that he expected this answer. In response, Chunjio argues that the Spectre Crystal is an object that proves the identity of the Green Purist clan members and asks where he got them from if he is not their clan member. In response, Jaehwan takes one of the crystals in his hands and states that he picked them up, prompting them to ask what happened to the possessors of those crystals. In response to their question, Jaehwan reveals that they are all dead, leading them to question who would dare harm the members of one of the 5 noble clans of the Great Land without feeling a trace of fear. Jaehwan boldly replies that he killed them all, leaving them shocked. However, telling the captains that he must have his reasons, Urun asks him why he did that. In response, Jaehwan states that they tried to fight him first and wanted to take the horns he had, which is why he had to fight them back. Hearing that, Urun remarks that the Green Purist clan is a group that is very greedy for materials and seems to understand why he did that. After a while, he turns to Jaehwan, asking him to explain in detail whatever happened after he came to Chaos. In response to Yurin's request to know about what happened to him, Jaehwan reveals that he got caught up in something and entered Chaos by chance. He got the spirit stones from the Emerald Bug clan by chance and entered the fortress. After that, he got caught up in the incident by chance, met the Divine Physician, and learned about the dead only after seeing it once. Hearing all of it, Urun states that it is all right, considering that he believes such words. Shangdio asks if he really thinks of them as true, and Urun disagrees, leading him to remark that he has gone insane. In response, Urun states that in order to gain someone else's trust, he first needs to trust that person. He then turns to Jaehwan again, stating that he wants to ask him a few more questions, and Jaehwan agrees to answer. After a small pause, Urun asks if the body he possesses is a living one. Hearing that, Jaehwan feels surprised and looks up, remembering that he refused to join the main game and came out of the tower by destroying it. He was mistaken for a dead person by the illusion tree and sent to Chaos, while his physical body might still be on Earth. Remembering all that, Jaehwan turns to Urun and asks how he came to know about it. In response, Urun repeats Jaehwan's claim that he got caught up in something and entered Chaos by chance and states that no one would describe their own death as he did. He then asks if Jaehwan does not want to reveal his identity because of some kind of threat, and Jaehwan disagrees. Urun considers this to be the reason for his troubles during the identification process, making Jaehwan remember whatever happened that day. Urun states that Jaehwan is the protagonist who is being chased by some kind of large power that has followed him to Chaos. Hearing that, Jaehwan becomes surprised and thinks that although he is not sure of it, it must be the person known as the Monarch of Pitch Darkness. He wonders how strong these monarchs are. Meanwhile, Urun continues to state that he will not ask about his identity or compensate for the damages he has caused. Instead, they will provide him protection. Hearing that, Jaehwan asks if the Gorgon fortress is strong enough to go up against the 12 monarchs of the Almighty Land. Hearing about the 12 monarchs, Urun asks if the 12 monarchs are the ones chasing after him, and he agrees, stating that it might be one of them. In response, Urun remarks that it is great, stating that the monarchs would become unable to interfere in the matters that occur within Chaos. Hearing that, Jaehwan asks what they want from him in return, and Urun states that they only want him to do one favor, which is to save the fortress master. 2 hours later, while going down the stairs to a basement, the person leading Jaehwan and Chunjio told them that Carlton and Mino are recovering in the treatment center. Turning to them, the person asks if they really want her to bring them to the training ground instead of the VIP room. Just then, Chunjio speaks up, stating that they should decide which one is superior among his and Jaehwan's thrust. Turning to Jaehwan, Shangdio remarks that he has also cleared the Tower of Masters, making him surprised. Turning to Chung Hyo, Jae-hwan asks if he knows anything about that, and he agrees. While they finally stop in front of a room, standing there, Chunjio states that if Jae-hwan wins against him, he will answer as many questions as he wants. However, he considers it impossible for Jae-hwan to win against him. After a lot of time passes, Jae-hwan stands unscathed while Chunjio, who crashed into a hole made in the floor, states that they will start the match again. Looking at the entire corridor about to collapse due to Chunjio crashing into the roof, walls, and ground countless times, Jae-hwan states that the match has already been decided. In response, Chunjio states that he still has not used his ultimate technique, and if he uses it, Jae-hwan will die, making Jae-hwan feel bored after hearing the same thing repeatedly. Calling him insolent, Shanggyo asks how old he is, and he reveals his age to be 60. In response, Chunjio states that he is 1,000 years old, and the 60 years of thrusting that Jae-hwan has done would never have a chance against his 1,000 years of slashing. Hearing that, Jae-hwan asks if he really slashed for 1,000 years, and Chunjio agrees, causing Jae-hwan to remark that his slashing looks like he has only had 10 years of practice. This enrages Chunjio, who jumps up from the hole, holding his sword, and states that this hit from him will change Jae-hwan's perspective. After that, he imbues his sword with powerful energy and charges at Jae-hwan, who, in response, takes out his sword as well, and an intense battle finally starts between the two. As their swords collide with each other, a powerful wave of energy is generated that surrounds them as they continue the relentless fight. In the middle of the fight, Chunjio strikes Jae-hwan with such force that he is pushed backward. Considering that he was pushed this far back even after using the normal stab, Jae-hwan feels shocked. Meanwhile, Chunjio remarks that his technique was very useful and asks what it was called. In response, Jae-hwan reveals it to be the normal stab, causing him to remark that it is a condescending name for such a remarkable technique. Chunjio states that this name makes one feel like there is an even stronger technique as compared to this one. In response, Jae-hwan holds his sword tightly and reveals that there is indeed a much stronger technique as compared to that. Hearing that, Chunjio feels shocked and asks what that is. When he sees Jae-hwan charging at him with an aura resembling that of the Soul King of Chaos, remembering the power and the fear of facing him, Chunjio starts to feel anxious. He thinks that Jae-hwan is making him remember the king and wonders if he can even slash him. He thinks that such a powerful attack might destroy the entire castle of Gorgon. Just then, Jae-hwan states that he is coming to attack. However, considering the destruction it can spread, Chunjio tells him to stop, stating that he has accepted his defeat. Meanwhile, in the fifth region of the Great Land, the Steel region, a person stands, ordering his subordinate to tell him about the details of the Pitch Black Monarch's actions. In response, the subordinate reveals that the Pitch Black Monarch is currently in contact with Chaos. The person, who turns out to be Helio, the Steel Monarch, asks why they are doing it. He states that all of the monarchs of the Great Land should be part of the pact that prevents them from interfering with matters of chaos. In response, his subordinate states that it is a bit complicated and requests that he look at the screen. Showing Jae-hwan, looking at Jae-hwan's video, Helio states that it is the one that has been circulating a lot and asks how it is related to that, while remarking that it is said to be fake. In response, his subordinate reveals that this person is the product that the Pitch Black Monarch was going to contract, making him shocked. After contemplating a little, Helio asks if the ninth region of the Almighty Land really has connections with chaos. The subordinate of Greece, stating that they recently covered this, reveals that the Pitch Black Monarch has been interfering with chaos for a long time, and some of the sects there have been in regular communication with the Pitch Black Monarch. Wondering what the Pitch Black Monarch is up to, Helio tells his subordinate to send a notice so that he can travel to Chaos, prompting her to ask if he is planning on interfering with Chaos. In response, Helio states that he is only planning to watch so that he can understand the situation and tells her to send 10 elite Gold 1 rank warriors and Hayoung. She complies. After she leaves, Helio wonders how Chunjio is doing, thinking that he would have lived a long time if he did not have such a hot-headed personality. Meanwhile, in the Gorgon castle, Chunjio tells Jae-hwan to stop and clings to his sword, stating that he cannot let him do this, while Jae-hwan tells him to get down, stating that he understands. Getting down from the sword, Chunjio remarks that it is impossible and asks how he is able to do something this powerful after just stabbing a few times over 40 years. In response, Jae-hwan reveals that he practiced stabbing about 10 billion times, causing Chunjio to ask if he stabbed 8 times a second without a break. Jae-hwan states that he can stab up to 100 times a second. Sitting down near Chunjio, Jae-hwan asks why he thinks that stabbing is only possible with the sword and brings his hand forward, causing shiny particles to emerge from it. Seeing that, Chunjio wonders if it is the sharp and foreign energy that he has felt since he first saw Jae-hwan. Looking at the particles surrounding Jae-hwan, he realizes that it is not energy or something like a fighting spirit but rather his hostility and intent to refine the world. Meanwhile, the shiny particles transform into small spikes emerging from his body that pierce through Chunjio's fingers. Jae-hwan states that this is what he calls stabbing, considering it to be unbelievable. Chunjio remarks that he has become stabbing himself and is repeatedly stabbing the world even at this very moment. In response, Jae-hwan repeats his claim to have practiced it 10 billion times, leaving him astonished. Jae-hwan then shows him a paper, stating that it is a contract that they wrote before dueling, which instructed the loser to grant the wish of the winner. He then starts to read out the contract loudly to remind Chunjio of his promise, causing him to become frustrated. Considering that he will have to grant his wish, Chunjio asks if he is planning on using him as a slave, but Jae-hwan disagrees. Jae-hwan states that he only wants him to answer his questions honestly, to which Chunjio agrees. However, before that, Jae-hwan states that they should go out and take a small walk. While they are walking around in the castle, Jae-hwan asks what the Master's Tower is. Chunjio reveals that the towers created by nightmares rank from F to S, and Master Craftsmen are those who manage to make the S rank as apprentices and become Master Craftsmen early on. Chunjio reveals that from among the towers created by the Masters, only the special ones related to cultivation can be called Master Towers. Hearing that, Jae-hwan asks why such towers are even created, and Chunjio replies that he is not sure about it, but he knows that the Awakeners who clear those towers keep appearing. In response, Jae-hwan asks if Chunjio is also from the Master's Tower, and he agrees, revealing that he came from Master Melville's fourth tower, known as Moby Dick. He remembers that it was like a calamity at that time, with many martial masters of the martial realm dying. He considers it a miracle for him to have cleared such a dangerous tower, sharing his belief that Jae-hwan also seems to be from the Master's Tower. Chunjio asks which tower he cleared, and Jae-hwan reveals it to be Molok's tower. Hearing that, Chunjio feels surprised, remarking that it is a difficult task to clear Molok's tower. In response, Jae-hwan asks if he knows Molok, and Chunjio agrees, revealing that he used to journey with him, leaving Jae-hwan surprised. To hear more, Jae-hwan asks if he has really traveled with Molok, and Chunjio states that it is a very long story, suggesting that they should take a walk outside. After that, they go outside the castle, walk in the streets, and have their dinner. Finding Claire selling food on the street because her pub was destroyed, Chunjio states that her stall is going to be an alfresco street stall for the time being. Looking at the summoning chamber in front of them, he states that this place is the one where souls that were worn out from the Almighty Land's war went for their sweet rest. He reveals that everyone was actually able to live a proper life after being released by them and started to value peace, throwing their weapons aside. While they are talking about that, they suddenly notice two people fighting behind them. However, considering them to be drunkards, Jae-hwan turns to the table and takes a sip of the drink but finds it tasteless. Just then, Chunjio reveals that they are not drunkards but are just acting like drunkards, and states that in chaos, one does not get old, hungry, or drunk. However, this was something that made humans want the opposite. He reveals that because they missed real life, which had depth, they began to act like they were living a real life in which they needed to eat to live. However, one day, drunkards who started to do new things appeared and gathered people to rediscover real life. These people started an expedition called the Abyss Expedition. Hearing that, Jae-hwan becomes surprised and asks why they were heading to the Abyss of all places. Chunjio reveals that they went there to look for the fruit of the resurrection accord. According to him, those are the fruits that hang on the branches of the illusion tree at the end of the abyss. Jae-hwan asks if a dead person can really be revived, and Chunjio agrees, saying that the only way that the dead can come back alive is by eating the fruit of resurrection. He reveals that the Abyss Expedition was an alliance that was formed for the sake of finding that fruit. Chunjio reveals that it was the time when he had already awakened and was at the age where he was fearless. Hearing that, Jae-hwan asks if Molok was also a part of the expedition, and Chunjio agrees, revealing that he was the captain who led the expedition and was a very unique individual. He remembers that during the expedition, Moloch came to him and stated that he had achieved an incomplete awakening without abandoning his emotions, which is very unique. Moloch remarked that it must be tough on him, while Chunjio simply told him to talk later, causing Moloch to ask if he was upset because of cultivation. Frustrated, Chunjio threw his sword towards Moloch, but he dodged it. Turning towards him, Chunjio asked why someone like him was going to the abyss while they usually sat in the rooms and created towers. In response, Moloch stated that he does not have anything to say regarding that, and it would be useless even if he apologized to him on behalf of all the mayors. The realization that mayors regretted making towers exist left him utterly shocked. With a sword in his hand, Moloch stated that even if Chunjio believes him or not, the reason for his going to the illusion tree and the abyss is the tower that ends all cultivation. After that, he walked towards Chunjio and returned the sword to him, stating that this is the reason why he is a part of the expedition. Surprised to hear all that, Jaehwan asks if the expedition was successful, and Chunjio reveals that he was only able to reach the entrance because he fell behind on the way. However, he shares his belief that Moloch succeeded in reaching the top of the illusion tree because the fruits of resurrection began to drop from the branches. He reveals that all the members of the expedition took a lot of fruits with them to chaos. Hearing which, Jaehwan wonders why Chunjio is still in chaos. Just then, Claire comes to their table, telling Chunjio to correct his facts and revealing that the expedition was a failure. But Chunjio disagrees with that. She tells Jaehwan that the expedition only succeeded until the part about obtaining the fruits. Recalling that, Chunjio reveals that when they were coming back to chaos, the monarchs and patriarchs of the Almighty Land attacked them because they did not have the courage to go back to the abyss. They chose to fight with the 4 fortress masters, and the 10 faction leaders who were part of the expedition were no match for them due to this overwhelming difference in power. Chunjio reveals that the fruit of resurrection was stolen from them. He states that those monarchs still use the fruits they stole from them to revive themselves each time they die, and they have been doing that for the past 900 years. He also tells Jaehwan about the resurrection palace where the monarchs take turns reviving when they die, following the order that was decided from the start. Hearing that, Jaehwan realizes that the people of chaos are so lethargic because they know that the fruit of resurrection is something they will never be able to obtain. Reminiscing about Moloch, Jaehwan turns to Chunjio to ask him something but finds him asleep. Turning to him, Claire states that it is useless because he is really drunk after acting drunk for 1,000 years. She reveals that, according to what she heard, Moloch was never seen by anyone again after the expedition ended. Just then, James comes to them, thanking Jaehwan and stating that it is only because of him that their captain has survived. Looking at Jaehwan's expression, James asks if he has forgotten about him already. He states that in the future, whenever Jaehwan enters Gorgon, he should come in through the north gate since they know his face and will not check his identification, telling him to keep it a secret from their captain. James starts to walk away while Jaehwan looks at him from behind. Soon after he leaves, someone else comes running from behind, calling out to him. Jaehwan turns to him, recognizing him to be Jaeher, who informs him that they are in big trouble. As they run towards the palace, they find dark and malevolent energy surrounding the palace, making them think that the fortress master is indeed dead. Jaehwan thinks that the spiritual pressure is 10 times greater than what he felt from the dead in the day. He remembers Jürgen saying that they would not ask him for his identity or to compensate for the damages caused by him but simply requested that he saved their fortress master. Remembering that, he turns to Jaeher, remarking that their master is undergoing beatification, and he agrees, stating that he suddenly went berserk, which is normal once a week, but not that day. Jaeher reveals that the fortress master is a very good person in reality, and before his beatification began, he was a living legend. He states that the fortress master was among the few people who went on the Abyss expedition with the divine physician, leaving Jaehwan surprised. To hear more, Jaehwan asks if he can perform the dead slash. In response, Jaeher tells him to do it in the physician's stead because of Chunjio's drunken state, but he refuses. Jaehwan states that he simply imitated the physician at the time and is not as good as Chunjio, and it might be a different case if he had learned from him. Soon after they reach the castle, they find it shaking badly and engulfed by a fierce storm, making Jaeher wonder if the fortress master is all right. Facing the severe storm, Jaeher suddenly looks up and finds the destruction and despair of the tower captain in front of them. Using his skill of comprehension, Jaehwan finds that they are actually looking for him. While Jaeher tells them to get aside, stating that it is urgent, they refuse to do it, and he inquires if they are intending to go against the wishes of the heavens. Hearing that, they start to laugh and state that the only heaven they have is the forbidden heaven. They leap up in the air to launch an attack, making Jaeher surprised at their fast move. Considering that they might harm Jaehwan, Jaeher tells him to quickly move away while they come down and launch an attack, causing the ground to get destroyed. As the clouds of dust clear, Jaeher appears from within, having blocked the attacks of both of them, which makes Jaehwan surprised at his power. Jaeher states that he did not expect the people of the Forbidden Heaven clan to be present in the castle and asks if they have forgotten who he is, stating that he pushes them with all his might, causing them to go flying backward. Doing that, Jaeher warns them to think carefully and go back, stating that if they follow, the fortress master might forgive them. Landing on the ground, one of them asks if he is talking about the creature that is bound underground. They remark that the fortress master cannot even control his own strength or distinguish between good and evil. They ask if Jaeher is still serving that person despite being aware of his condition. Jaeher responds with a firm belief in the fortress master's eventual recovery. Suddenly, the other captain swiftly approaches Jaeher from behind to launch an attack, asserting that conversations are ineffective. Hearing that, Jaeher quickly turns around, but before he can react, the attacker strikes in with a weapon, sending him crashing to the ground. Looking down at him, they comment that if he had been a little smarter, they would not have needed to fight with him like that. Lying on the ground, Jaeher contemplates how these Stage 4 adapters are able to contend with a Stage 5 adapter like himself, struggling to understand how they are doing it. Considering that he cannot estimate their speed and strength, Jaeher realizes that this is not normal and thinks that something dangerous is happening. While he is pondering about that, Jaehwan arrives on the scene and tosses Chunjio onto Jaeher's face, instructing him to escape as a form of punishment for Jaeher pushing him earlier. Looking at him, the two captains ask if he is the person who can perform a dead slash, prompting him to ask what they will do if he is the one. Using his comprehension skills, he deduces that they think of him as a non-adapter who has a powerful weapon and consider him too weak to even launch a powerful punch. Suddenly, Jaehwan maneuvers behind them and delivers a forceful punch to one of the captains, causing him to collide with the wall, and asks if they are talking about that kind of punch. Seeing that the other one held his weapon to fight against Jaehwan, looking at him, Jaehwan states that they have too many openings to call this act a defense and launches a powerful punch in his face. In response, the captain swings his spear-like weapon, causing the ground to crack, and then executes an upward circular motion that propels Jaehwan away, calling him a weak person. The captain rushes at him while Jaehwan realizes that his energy is growing stronger and stronger with time. While Jaehwan wonders what kind of energy this is, the person asks if he thinks someone like him can save the fortress master, even if he is able to get to him. Realizing that his energy is based on the technique of fear, Jaehwan considers it ridiculous that they are trying to betray others with that level of ability. Thinking that, Jaehwan states that he cannot save that fortress master since it is the duty of Chunjio. With that, he steps on the captain's spear and leaps up, making them confused. Coming down towards him, Jaehwan states that killing both of those traitors will be a different story. However, meanwhile, in the inner part of the fortress, the malice and energy of the dead start to spread around, becoming stronger with every passing moment. Seeing it, the officials of the castle feel anxious, stating that it has not even been a day since the dead slash was performed. Looking at the fortress master in a state of berserk, they wonder how his condition worsened like that. Yurin thinks that he saw with his own eyes that when the doctor came in the morning, the deatification calmed down. However, looking at his current condition, he wonders why he is suddenly rampaging again at a time when they started getting hopeful for his recovery. Thinking about his treatment, Yurin remembers Chunjio saying that Jaehwan's dead slash is merely an imitation at the moment and it would take him a long time for it to become worth trying. Remembering that they had very high hopes for Jaehwan, Yurin looks at the people standing behind him and thinks that one of them must know where Jaehwan is. He thinks that he was already aware of a traitor being present among them and remembers his conversation with the fortress master regarding this issue. During their conversation, the fortress master stated that he would go and deal with the issue of spiritual corruption by himself, which made him feel worried. Thinking that it was very dangerous, Yurin suggested that he sent a captain or a minister instead. But the fortress master remarked that Yurin does not have any faith in him. The fortress master stated that he has lived through a dangerous war and that despite getting defeated, he will continue to work for the well-being of his people. However, when he went to complete this mission, he got spiritually corrupted himself. Remembering the people who went with him on that mission, he looks at Mayhan, wondering if he could be the one responsible for that. While Mayhan orders the guards to take their positions, hearing that, Yurin turns to him, stating that they should not enter before the doctor arrives. But he argues that if they delay further, it will be the end of Gorgon. Stating that they cannot perform the dead slash without the doctor, Yurin asks if he is planning on killing the fortress master. In response, Mayan states that they cannot defeat the fortress master even if they all charge at him at once. Therefore, he reveals that he is going to perform a dead seal, prompting Yurin's hand to argue that it is their final option. However, Mayan states that it will be too late if they wait anymore and they need to at least preserve the fortress master's spiritual energy through that technique. In response, Yurin states that they do not have a specter crystal to do that, but Mayan says that there is no need to hide it since everyone knows already. Just then, the Dark Shadow Captain appears from behind holding a box, making Yurin realize that he is actually a traitor. Looking at the box, he thinks that it must be holding the specter crystal that Jae-hwan had, stating that it involves the future of Gorgon. Mayhem asks why he is hiding and monopolizing such an important item, while Yurin remains silent. Mayan states that he is aware of the consequences of the fortress master transforming into a real dead, with suspicion in his eyes. Mayhem asks if Yurin was actually planning to turn the fortress master into a strong monster, remembering how dangerous it is. Mayan states that he has seen with his own eyes how much of a threat just a medium-sized dead monster was to Gorgon. He states that mega dead monsters are a calamity that commands countless deaths and brings ruination everywhere they sweep through, asking if Yurin really wants to see that happen. Considering that the fortress master is in a very critical state and the doctor is not there, Yurin thinks that Mayhan's current opinions are valid. However, he states that a dead seal is not something that anyone with a specter crystal can do, since it's a secret technique of the Green Purist clan, and asks how he will bring them here. In response, Mayan states that he should not worry and reveals that he has already called people who have learned that secret technique. Just then, a few people with their faces covered enter the area, while Mayan states that they are not from the Green Purist clan but are capable of performing the seal. Looking at them, Yurin thinks that this is not good at all, since performing a seal like that would put all of the Castellan's spiritual energy into the specter crystal. After that, if someone came into possession of the specter crystal with his spiritual energy, they would be able to inherit that energy and become the master of Gorgon. He knows that if Gorgon falls into the wrong hands, it will be destroyed. Just then, he notices one of the people taking out the crystal from the box and becomes surprised, considering that there is someone who can hold the specter crystal without being a Green Purist. Remembering the words of the Castellan about people who can manipulate spiritual corruption, Yurin becomes shocked, realizing that these are the people the fortress master was referring to. He realizes that everything from the Castellan getting spiritually corrupted to his current state was part of Mayhan's plan. Having found it out, Yurin commands all the subordinates to stop Mayhan, but to his surprise, they refuse to follow, making him realize that they were all involved in that plan. Realizing that there is nothing he can do, Yurin apologizes to the Castellan, while the traitors initiate the dead seal. Remembering the fortress master, Yurin thinks that because of his complacency, he was unable to protect Gorgon. While he is thinking that, tears begin to fall from his eyes and he feels powerless to do anything, and sits on the ground, lowering his head. Just then, the roof of the interior chamber breaks, making them all shocked, and a sudden wind begins to blow. While they all look up in confusion, Jae-hwan suddenly appears, accompanied by Jaehae, making them all surprised. Looking at him, Mayhem asks who he is and how he came there. In response, Jaehae tells him to keep quiet and tosses the two captains they fought with in front of him, stating that his people have already told them about all this traitorous acts. Upon hearing this revelation, Mayan gazes at the fallen captain who offers an apology before taking his own life. Jaehae expresses astonishment at Mayhem's apparent lack of control over the situation. In response, Mayan explains that the captains had pledged to commit suicide upon exposure, absolving him of responsibility. Hearing that, Jaehae tells everyone to get ready for the battle, stating that this is a rebellion. However, to his shock, instead of catching my hand, all of them point their swords towards Jaehaer and apologize to him for doing that. They tell him not to go against the will of the Forbidden Heaven clan and state that they will need him to stay like that until the seal is completed. Looking at all the situations, Jaehwan turns to Yurin, stating that he promised him to provide protection if he treated the fortress master, but arguing that Gorgon does not seem to be in the state of providing him protection. Therefore, he states that they should change the contents of the promise, making Yurin confused. Jaehwan states that he will save the fortress master and kill all the traitors, but in return, he wants to have Chunjio and set up the Abyss expedition again. He states that he wants them to help him with that. Hearing that, Yurin remarks that it is nonsense. Just then, Manhwa chimes in and states that he has already heard the story about the person who was able to kill Janaya in a single strike, and has come to realize that it is indeed true. In that case, Mayan states that they will also use all of their power. In response, Jaehwan pulls out his sword and stands in between countless enemies charging at him from all directions, with fierce intent in his eyes. He leaps up and starts to kill them one by one at a very fast speed, making my hand shocked. Realizing that they are coming at him endlessly, he stands still for a moment and takes a deep sigh. After that, he strikes his sword on the ground and uses the normal thrust, directing it towards them. As the thrust hits him, Mayhem realizes that it is impossible for him to block such a powerful attack and drifts away. However, as soon as he gets away to save himself from the attack, the energy collides with the chains holding the fortress master, causing them to break. Looking at the big hole formed in the wall behind the fortress, Mayan becomes shocked, thinking that if he had not gotten away, he would have died by this attack. Meanwhile, Jaehaer and Yurin, who are standing at a distance, feel surprised at Jaehwan's incredible destructive power. Using the comprehending skill, simultaneously, Jaehwan grasps that the traitor's initial plan of utilizing the Dead Seal has failed, prompting them to resort to a plan B. Soon after, he comes to know that their next plan is to use the Black Cloud, regardless of how much destruction it spreads in Gorgon, which makes him feel shocked. Turning to Mayhem, who sits on the ground, badly injured, Jaehwan states that he is the outer administrator of the fortress and the first elder of the Forbidden Heavens clan. Jaehwan states that although he is not aware of their purpose in corrupting the souls of others, he admires people like them, saying that he moves away while Mayhem orders his people to attack him and take him down no matter what. Complying, the entire army of traitors starts to rush towards him while he stands still, holding his sword, stating that he likes such people because they make it easy for him to destroy this world. With that, he unleashes a powerful slash that pierces through the castle, reaching skyward like a comet, then brilliantly illuminates the heavens like a firework. While they all look at the sky with surprise, Yurin thinks of it as a sign of overwhelming hope. He remembers the fortress master stating that the people of chaos need an overwhelming hope that does not falter in the face of anything. Meanwhile, the overwhelming energy that touched the sky starts to rain down upon the traitors, causing them to die and spreading massive destruction. Turning to Jaehaer, Jaehwan asks if Chunjio is still sleeping, and he replies that he is not waking up no matter how hard he tries. Hearing that, Jaehwan takes him from them and crashes him onto the wall, shocking them with the impact of the collision. Chunjio finally wakes up, feeling a lot of pain in his back. While Jaehwan states that he should have woken up by himself, just then, the condition of the fortress master begins to deteriorate, and they get a warning that his spiritual corruption has reached up to 99.9%, and the process of deatification has started. Don't forget to subscribe and like the video. Thanks for watching, the Baka Senpai.